Chronicle of Higher Education about how University of Austin, which is the anti-woke university, unaccredited university started by Barry Weiss.
And with the help, of course, of a bunch of really rich guys like Andreessen, Horowitz, etc.
And what's his face? Harlan Crow. The guy who bought Thomas, or kept him on the Supreme Court.
Yep. So a bunch of, Barry Weiss, her whole career has been elevated by right-wing billionaires, and this is no exception.
And the funny part about this is that UATX was started because it was supposed to be, we don't censor. We are not censorious. We allow all different opinions here. According to an analysis from Chronicle of Higher Education, many of the people who joined UATX at the beginning of the school project departed, either by choice or due to public disagreements with the school's trajectory. Over 20 university employees have left UATX. Ellie Avashi, the co-founder and director of the Mill Institute, which is an educational organization working with UATX, was asked to leave the university after posting an article about diversity initiatives on LinkedIn. In that post, Avashi wrote, "We can have criticisms of DEI without wanting to tear down the whole concept of diversity and inclusion." And Barry Weiss fired her. In a piece for the website Quillette in May, Avashi said that she had been drawn to UATX initially because she experienced ideological tribalism while at Harvard. But Avashi said that instead she never expected to also find ideological litmus test at UATX. In other words, there's ideological tribalism everywhere. But Harvard didn't fire you.
It's almost like Barry Weiss, who I guess
what you posted on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Barry Weiss, reading about this morning, I was reminded that I guess after the election, she hosted a debate between Sam Harris and Ben Shapiro, and Sam Harris was the Kamala representative, and Shapiro was the Trump one. It's like that's both sides. That's what a center-right Zionist and a far-right Zionists are going to debate American politics.
Well, that was like my old buddy, Indy Mike, who said, I'm independent. I listen to both sides. I listen to both Megyn Kelly and Sean Hannity.
Bill Maher now.
But this story is not about Barry Weiss at UATX or UATX, whatever that unaccredited
That's UATX.
She's now the head of all the news at CBS. Based upon her running a small Substack.
You have shown
and they're
bronze for iron and rule with horse and sword. The sky above begins to reveal its secrets, a collection of heaven that uplifts our hearts and guides us to foreign shores. Great warlord Alexander, beneath your sword shall Macedonia spread throughout the world. Every kingdom shall be a unique challenge to overcome, but the rewards will be great if you remain true and brave. Turn away from peace.
Our civilization's dedication to military affairs has given rise to a great general among our troops. When used wisely in the field, generals can change the tide of battle in our favor.
was for weeks apparently advertising about a 60-minute story that was going to be about CCOT, which of course is that gulag in El Salvador that the Trump administration sent just randos who were not American citizens there. Although I think it was one American citizen?
But either way, this is where Camargo Garcia was sent. This is where the hairdresser was sent. The man with the autism awareness tattoo. The real horror stories that we've highlighted. People remember the CCOTs. Essentially a torture camp. They horrifically abused the detainees there.
And so CBS had advertised this segment on Friday, featuring interviews by Sharon Alfonsi, among others. They interviewed some of the deported migrants who have since been released from the Gulag, saying they described, quote, the brutal and torturous conditions they endured. And Barry Weiss apparently, I think at first killed it and then said, oh, we're just actually holding it back for more content.
For comment by the Trump administration.
Well, and here's the thing. Yes, they want to actually allow Stephen Miller to go on camera. And the point is that for weeks, in fact, weeks and weeks, they have asked, at least the reporters did, comment from the White House, and they said nothing. So Sharon Alfonsi, this 60 Minutes correspondent, said that Barry Weiss spiked the story. And the reason why we know this is because apparently the Wall Street Journal reported it because they got hold of this email. And the email, I'll read parts of it.
This is an internal email of that correspondent to, I guess, the rest of the CBS team.
Yes, because on Saturday, apparently, Barry Weiss spiked the story, and people found out about it like throughout the next day, I guess, and said, what's going on? What's going on? So she wrote, News team, thank you for the notes and texts. I apologize for not reaching her earlier. I learned on Saturday that Barry Weiss spiked our story inside CCOT, which was supposed to air tonight. We, Ori and I, asked for a call to discuss her decision. She did not afford us that courtesy/opportunity. That's what's sort of like, that's honestly the most shocking thing about it. That she's like, I don't need to give you a reason at all for spiking a story that we have been advertising and it clearly has been set up to go. I mean, let's be clear what happened here. Someone in the White House saw that they were going to run with the story. And Ellison's trying to take over WB. In fact, he just offered like a $40 billion guarantee. And they realized, like, this is going to be a problem for us.
Right. And her explanation of we need Stephen Miller to come on camera and comment about this, it literally just allows the Trump administration to hold the story and kill it. Because if they never comment on it, if that's your standard, then the story doesn't come out. And that's the purpose.
This is what,
sorry, Aaron, jumping in.
No, but that's what she said. We requested responses to questions or interviews with DHS, the White House, and the State Department. Government silence is a statement, not a veto.
Yep.
Their refusal to be interviewed is a tactical maneuver designed to kill the story. If the administration's refusal to participate becomes a valid reason to spike a story, we have effectively handed them a kill switch for any reporting they find inconvenient. If the standard for airing a story becomes, quote, the government must agree to be interviewed, then the government effectively gains control over the 60 Minutes broadcast. We go from an investigative powerhouse to a stenographer for the state. These men risk their lives to speak with us. We have a moral and professional obligation to the sources who entrusted us with their stories. Abandoning them now is a betrayal of the most basic tenet of journalism, giving voice to the voiceless. She goes on to compare this to what was the name of that movie they made about this? Actually,
the Pacino one.
No, not Pacino. It was the guy, the Australian guy. The guy who was in the Oh, come on. You know, the Australian action guy.
Crocodile Dundee.
No, not Crocodile Dundee. He was in
Russell Crowe?
Russell Crowe.
I don't know what movie you're talking about.
The one about this. CBS like the Jeffrey Wiggin interview due to legal concerns nearly destroying the credibility of this broadcast. It took years to recover from that low point. By pulling the story to shield an administration, we're repeating that history, but for political optics rather than legal ones. That was the one about the inside.
The inside.
I was
Never seen it.
No, it's not Pacino. Maybe he was also in the film.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the insider.
Okay. Yeah, no, Russell Crowe was the insider. Yeah, Pacino was the 60 Minutes journalist.
Okay, thank you. Pacino was over the hell. It was all Russell Crowe. We're getting sidetracked.
Unreal. Okay. Now everybody can hear me, I think. That's fine. That's good. That's fine. Okay. Yes. Okay. Everyone can hear me. Now let's play the video and talking.
We've been
over the video.
promoting the show.
Okay.
I should say
We are getting sidetracked.
Yes, I am getting sidetracked. I got this. The full letter was posted by Yashar Ali. We have been promoting this story on social media for days. Our viewers are expecting it. When it fails to air without credible explanation, the public will correctly identify this as corporate censorship. We are trading 50 years of gold standard reputation for a single week of political quiet. I care too much about this broadcast to watch it be dismantled without a fight. I mean, of course, it's Ellison. I mean, look, there's two things that are going on here. One is Barry Weiss desperately wants to be seen as an adult by these right-wingers. That has always been her thing. She's had two things. One started when she was at Columbia trying to get Palestinian professors fired because they were Palestinians. So it's her racism and her Zionist bigotry. That's one thing that she has. And then the other is complete. She so desperately wants to be embraced by the right. That's why she. Although some, like she's a woman married to another woman. She
Jewish. Yeah, they have issues with that now.
She famously addressed a Republican caucus or a conservative group and said, "Look, I know you guys don't agree with why I'm here, but we all can agree that we want our taxes cut." And she's the one who introduced the world to the IDW, that secret cabal of brilliant thinkers like Dave Rubin and the Weinstein brothers and Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, who were not able to get any publicity whatsoever or any exposure to the public.
Help so many lost men find their way with that. Shout out.
So this is a twofer. I mean, she has this job because she knows that Ellison, she's Ellison's lapdog, and they have aligned interests. Ellison wants the Trump administration to okay his takeover of Warner Brothers, and they don't want to upset the president. But then they have this conflict that they have a major news organization that's supposed to report on the president.
Right. I mean, I can't imagine what the rest of that newsroom is thinking right now. Like we're already.
Should have resigned. Dickerson did get out, by the way. He threw to the Barry Weiss thing, but he's out now. Yeah.
She is alienating really quickly basically anybody with self-respect that works at CBS.
Without a doubt. But the thing is that it's going to be hard for them to dislodge because I don't think at the end of the day they care.
Right.
You don't care. This is not, like she has no experience in doing this. And
But on the opinion pages,
I don't think Ellison,
I was
at the
right.
end of the day,
She is an opinion writer in the New York
about
Times.
the news
That's what I was saying.
except
when
for
you
to carry one message and one message only. And so I don't really like at most news organizations alienating all the reporters and journalists and writers would be a problem. I don't know if it's going to be a problem at CBS because I think they're perfectly willing to say goodbye.
Well,
we don't care if you give us a degraded product because we have our people writing the pro-Israeli stuff and the pro-administration stuff, so we don't really care.
But I just wonder, like, they bought the Free Press for what, $150 million? It was wildly overvalued. She has value, I guess, but when does she have, when is it more valuable to have a faceless person who is the bulwark against, the crazy leftists that care about the genocide in Gaza and, believe that diversity is actually something we should engender? When does her value go away when you just replace that with a similar person with similar ideology who isn't this desperate, cloying, publicly embarrassing, and expensive. But I guess the die's already cast.
So much money.
It's interesting because it speaks to how stupid you can be and still be a billionaire.
Yes.
That type of money engenders stupidity. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. I mean, it doesn't mean that the guy's not capable of being smart in one specific area. But that kind of money and power makes you think that you're a genius. And then you start to apply your genius to areas where you do not have any understanding, any experience, any insight. And so the first charlatan who comes along, maybe the second, who comes along and is good at selling themselves as opposed to actually knowing what they're doing. Like I saw this in America all the time. You have people with money. And they had no idea about the business at all. They just were attracted to the person with the nicest watch who came through the door and sold them the thing. But that person was just good at selling themselves.
But that's her talent. That's always been her talent, is the ability to flatter the sensibilities of right-wing men, particularly if they're Zionists, and particularly if they're conservative and wealthy. And she's sold them a whole bill of goods. She's able to carve out this new center that is going to make sure that the lines of acceptable debate basically include anybody, or exclude anybody that is going to change anything. And the Ellisons are some of the most powerful Zionist donors in the world. I don't think that we can get around that. And this is very much motivating it.
David Ellison said he hired Weiss to bring CBS, quote, news that reflects reality and journalism that, quote, doesn't seek to demonize but to understand. And nobody believes that. Nobody in this industry believes that, but they have to act like it's true because he's got the money.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people are maybe sort of half pretending it's true. But the funny thing is, the question is this guy going to realize? He's not. I mean, I don't want to spoiler alert, but he is going to be faced with the question of do I realize that maybe my sense of what reality is not actually reality? Maybe Barry Weiss's sense of reality, that the country is hungry to hear from Erica Kirk, I can't remember her name, and find out what's like in her heart, and to promote her book. I mean, no. I mean, even with all the sort of like conspiracy around it, even with like the reality TV show about it, like no.
Well, you're supposed to be a little more subtle when you manufacture consent, I feel like. It's just so obvious. I mean,
if you did this when the Insider came out, like a billionaire just bought CBS and said, do this. Everyone would be like, what? And that's exactly what's happening now, except they're trying it anyway.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about...
Great. Let me find some stuff. Let's do this one.
Kirk's murder. The United States Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, led a group of troops in the Lord's Prayer in honor of his fallen friend. A man of faith, Hegseth hosted a Fox series on the life of Jesus, and he opened his Senate confirmation hearing by thanking God.
All glory, regardless of the outcome, belongs to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
And his third wife. He also thanked his third wife. When he's not basking in the glory of Christ, he's breaking international law by giving orders to kill them all during boat strikes in the Caribbean. But the wildest thing is that Hegseth's faith and militaristic bloodlust aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, they're both perfectly consistent with American evangelical Christianity, which is maybe a problem. Maybe that's not great. Maybe we don't love it. So how did a religion that calls for loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you get transformed into a white nationalist political project?
Tell us. Identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division.
And how can we stop this project from turning America into some white Christian ethno-state? Well, this video is a companion to my recent video that discusses my own personal journey out of evangelicalism and into the loving hands of Karl Marx. And this one I'm going to examine the historical and political convergence of these ideas. But if you want to check out my personal backstory, I'm going to leave the link to that video in the description. So while young Michael and his friends were talking theology in bars and joining social justice-oriented protest movements across the country, another generation of young evangelicals were basically doing Andrew Tate stuff, but for Jesus instead of sex trafficking.
Yoga is demonic.
And this right wing of the evangelical movement was already decades into a project of infiltrating and co-opting American political and military power to serve the goal of creating a white Christian ethno-state.
Jesus deals with other kingdoms by crushing them.
Okay, so that's Pastor Mark Driscoll, who was in many ways ahead of his time. He was an MMA influencer years before Joe Rogan had a podcast microphone that was lowered down enough so that he could reach it. And he also preached about a sort of hyper masculinity that would be right at home in the darkest corners of contemporary YouTube.
From his mouth comes a sharp sword. Yes, your son should be able to play with swords.
One of his primary concerns was that Christian men had been, and this is his language, not mine, pussified. And that this pussification process led to men avoiding church because they had no interest in a quote, Richard Simmons, hippie, queer Christ. Again, his words, not mine. He once, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up, told the women in his congregation that it was their duty to give their husbands blowjobs to get them to come to church.
Incredible.
And this was all what a vision of Jesus as an American badass.
Totally, completely badass.
Driscoll called Jesus an aggressive, anger-filled leader who picked fights with religious authorities, slaughtered thousands of pigs, ordered his disciples around and didn't mind causing offense. You know, this Jesus was an ultimate fighting warrior king with a tattoo down his leg who rides to battle against Satan, sin, and death on a trusty horse. 90% sure Jesus doesn't ride a horse in the Bible. Please let me know. If he does. I'm definitely sure he doesn't have a tattoo down his leg in the Bible, but you know.
I want to give special thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video. Now, while Jesus might have been all about healing the sick, when you get sick or hurt here in America, it can be a real pain to figure out how to get the help you need. And ZocDoc, while not being able to perform literal miracles, makes it easier for you to find local and in-network doctors and instantly book an appointment. Now, I used ZocDoc for the first time a few years ago after I injured myself hitting golf balls at a driving range. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm so fragile, I wasn't able to hit a bucket of golf balls at a driving range without needing medical attention. So I went to ZocDoc and I searched for a doctor who worked on hand injuries, took my insurance, and was 15 minutes away. And I got an appointment to see someone that same week. And their search feature made it really easy to enter everything that I needed. And once you find a doctor that's a good fit, ZocDoc shows you their appointment openings and lets you choose a slot so you can instantly book a visit. And for those of you who are curious Yes, after I saw this doctor, I was healed within a few weeks and back to hitting golf balls at a local public driving range as a form of exercise. I've used ZocDoc since, and generally it makes things so much easier.
Who had used Burn is. Driscoll and other pastors of his generation explicitly used cage fighting as a model of both Christian masculinity and as a mode of outreach.
I don't think there's anything purer. Two guys in a cage, no balls, no sticks, no bats, no help, no team, and just see which man is better.
By 2010, according to Kristen Dumais, an estimated 700 evangelical churches had a dedicated MMA outreach program.
Mainstream Christianity has feminized men. If we would raise our boys to be men, these kind of problems go away.
If any of you participated in those, please let me know what it was like. Now, if all that got you hyped up, you probably want to order some gear from Jesus Didn't Tap, so that everyone knows your Christian love turns off the moment you step foot in the octagon. Now, this was and is a brand of Christianity in which masculinity, strength, and violence were all seen as virtues, and in which there was a thin line between personal violence and nationalist violence. And one of the founders of this brand of hyper-masculine red pill American Christianity is a pastor named Doug Wilson. He's a friend and colleague of Mark Driscoll and an inspiration to America's pastor of war, Pete Hegseth. Along with being a prolific content creator, Wilson established a network with over 150 churches on 4 continents, recently opening one up just steps from the White House. And at his D.C. church, the pastor has stated that worship is warfare. Now, Wilson and his church preach a type of faith that's marked by anger, violence, and hyper-traditional gender and sexual norms.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
In case you didn't catch what he said there, he said, women are the kind of people come out of. Women are the kind of people come out of. Women are the kind of people come out of. Women are the kind of people come out of. He's also about Christian nationalists.
Christian Nationalist Society.
It's coming through twice. Okay. That is an issue. Okay, because I had a feeling that might have been the case, but I needed someone else to tell me. We're just not going to have Civ audio. Give me a second. Screen share, window, Civ, and you don't really need the audio for Civ anyway, so that's fine. Let me tell me if this fixed it.
For Muslims and Hindus and people who aren't Christians.
Yes, but not room for a ton of them.
But here's the thing, okay?
Okay, how we looking now? All good? The fucking system audio is so frustrating. Like, I'm streaming, but the audio is coming through, so I can hear everything, but I can't hear myself and I can't hear the stream. And if I put the stream feed on, you guys will hear the monitor.
None of this is new. And it isn't the exception to a brand of American religion that's otherwise normal and good. This inherent sense of masculinity, this love of violence, this politics of domination is something that's been cooked into American evangelicalism from the start. And understanding this can actually help make sense of our dystopian political moment.
I'm a Christian, and I robustly support the state of Israel.
According to Kristen Dumais' book, Jesus and John Wayne, this type of far-right, hyper-masculine brand of evangelical Christianity has been on the rise since the post-war period in America, embodied in everyone from traveling evangelist Billy Graham to noted Hollywood cowboy and white supremacist John Wayne. Real thing, by the way. In an interview in the 70s, he referred to himself as a white supremacist. Now, since its modern inception, evangelicalism has consistently stood for a few key ideas, very few of them explicitly theological in nature. I'm going to try to sum them up here. First, they think that Christianity is a firmly patriarchal and masculine religion. You know, men are meant to lead, and to lead with power and strength. Second, this brand of spiritual masculinity supports projects of national war and conquest as long as they're being carried out by the nations associated with the project of the West. And as far back as World War I, American evangelicals have made it clear that in these days, all are patriots or traitors to your country and the cause of Jesus Christ. In other words, they've long said that it's like good to go to war. Like Jesus wants you to go to a war and shoot people with guns. That is a thing that these people think. I'm not making this up. It's a real thing. Third, evangelicalism always has a primary cultural and political enemy. For most of the 20th century, the enemy was communism. You know, Billy Graham once said, communism is a religion that is inspired, directed, and motivated by the devil himself, who had declared war against Almighty God. And in the years after 9/11, Islam joined communism as one of the satanic forces to be defeated by America. Fourth, they think that God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and that any sort of queer sexual identity or relationship is an all-out affront to God. And finally, they believe that mass media and consumer culture are necessary tools for building power and influencing society. Oh, as a bonus, these guys also did not like the music of Prince.
You know about Prince? You know that he parades back and forth on the stage when he's giving a live concert and masturbates the neck of his guitar and ejaculate flies out of the end of it?
Now, this all leads to a culture engaged in an ongoing holy war against its enemies. And the fear produced by these enemies leads to a desire for an especially masculine type of political power and strength. As Kristen Dumais writes in Jesus and John Wayne, generations of evangelicals learned to be afraid of communist, feminist, liberals, secular humanist, the homosexuals, the United Nations, the government, Muslims, and immigrants. And they were primed to respond to those fears by looking to a strong man to rescue them from danger, a man who embodied a God-given, testosterone-driven masculinity. Jesus is high T. That's what I'm getting from this. Jesus is teed up. Jesus is a corked up white boy dripping with the sauce, but he wasn't white. This also creates the evangelical persecution complex, where the civil rights of immigrants, Muslims, and trans people is taken as a direct threat to the existence of white American evangelicalism.
Let us protect religious liberty, including for the most persecuted religion on the planet today. It's called Christianity.
Duper writes that if history teaches us anything, it is that militant white evangelicalism thrives on a sense of embattlement. This creates a sense in which Christian ethical principles, stuff like empathy, charity, forgiveness, compassion, can all be suspended for the sake of defeating the enemy. Whether the enemy is desegregation or queer rights, feminism, socialism, the existence of trans people, or books that are scary.
Blessed are those who are persecuted. And so, look, being persecuted is a blessing. I think Pastor might agree with this. If you aren't currently being condemned, death threats, being trying to run out of town, you're not fighting hard enough. I mean that. Look, you got to be boundary pushing. You have to be trying to, you could tell a lot of a man based on the enemies that you earn.
Christians all over the nation are being attacked, persecuted for their beliefs.
And this administration are fully committed to restoring and defending religious liberty for all Americans.
Evangelical Christians are the ones that have to explain ourselves a lot.
They're attacking.
Yeah, well, you're the ones being
painting white as
audio
evil,
is working. This is correct.
as a tool to disconnect
Who needs John here?
all of us from Christianity.
Objective morality is under attack.
Religious freedom means we all can sing our faith regardless of who we are, where we live, and what we believe. But today, faith is under attack in way too many places.
Most people who are American assume that the reason why there is no persecution of Christians in the United States is because we live in a free country and we have the freedom to believe in whatever religion we choose. But that is not true.
And if this holy war has a contemporary martyr, well, it's the late Charlie Kirk.
Charlie
who wielded
Kirk?
the power of the media and the logic
We
of
are
consumption
Charlie Kirk,
to
baby.
create a new generation of militant Christian nationalists, putting him in a historical line going from Billy Graham to Jerry Falwell to James Dobson.
Well, this is why your faith is the most important thing. Because for those of us that are Christians, it doesn't drive you crazy. You actually see what's going on, which is that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and darkness and spirits, that there is a spiritual war here.
He's so
Now,
cringe.
Kirk understood that the key to growing his movement and gaining power wasn't careful argumentation or acts of Christian love and service. It was creating a media empire that spread his message in easily digestible sound bites, i.e. content.
Free sex drives young women insane. The more sexual partners a young woman has in college, the more likely she is to be clinically depressed, on antidepressants, because sex for men is totally different than sex for women.
These sound bites and clips were then consumed and regurgitated by the young masses, leading to the rapid expansion of his message, and leading many to compare him to a modern-day MLK. Oh boy, what are we doing?
MLK, in my personal opinion and based on every objective analysis, he actually gave us more race focus and less emphasis on character and conduct.
This consumptive practice is, of course, part of the evangelical playbook. As Dumais writes, the products Christians consume shape the faith they inhabit. And as she writes, describing the early growth of American evangelicalism, to evangelize the nation, evangelicals needed magazines that could reach millions and access to the airwaves for national radio broadcasts. They needed organizations for missions and for evangelical colleges and Bible schools. They already possessed the resources and the brainpower. What was missing was a network that would support and amplify these individual efforts. But it's not just Kirk that gets to be a martyr. In this new culture of evangelical persecution, the smallest slight can turn your average college tennis player into a victim worthy of national media attention. Take Samantha Fulnecki, the Oklahoma college student who bravely stood up for her faith by writing a completely dogshit college assignment about how God created two genders, but also one gender, and how it's like demonic forces that lead people to be trans or queer, and how it's biblically justifiable to bully queer kids or something like that. Free speech, things of that nature.
I gave my opinion, and not just my opinion, but that's like the Bible says that God created male and female, and
did she cite the Bible as a citation?
From God or glorifying to God is glorifying to the enemy.
And what seems to be a really obvious setup to punish a trans professor and then gain media attention, Fulnecki received a 0 on her assignment, then both contested the grade with the university and shared her story with Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization, who turned it into an example of a resentful trans professor persecuting a faithful white Christian student. Now, while the martyrs of previous generations, like Catholic Archbishop Oscar Romero, were assassinated while giving mass by the members of a right-wing death squad, today's evangelical martyrs become spiritual heroes by refusing to use citations in a college assignment.
Amazing.
Romero died while asking soldiers in his country to refuse to carry out violent acts of repression in the name of the state, while Fulnecki likely orchestrated the whole affair with her mother, who's an attorney that defended January 6ers, and the Erica Kirk-run TPUSA. And let's be clear here, Romero wasn't trying to get killed, but Fulnecki is very clearly trying to turn herself into a victim for attention. As my colleague Lux put it, St. Stephen didn't get filled with those arrows on purpose. Now, Fulnecki isn't the only one to ride the post-Kirk wave, as quickly after his passing, J.D. Vance jumped on his show to weaponize the logic of Christian persecution to further the political project of white nationalism. Now, Vance, who is a member of the same church as Oscar Romero and Dorothy Day, advocates for a version of Christianity more theologically aligned with that of Kirk and Fulnecki, two individuals who I'm pretty sure were incapable of reading a book. And Vance bridges an interesting divide between the more hardcore white Christian nationalists like Doug Wilson and Pete Hegseth and the theologically curious tech dystopian world of guys like Peter Thiel. Now, Thiel not only handpicked and then funded Vance's political rise, he's also recently become obsessed with religion in his own way, giving lectures in San Francisco about the rise of the Antichrist, honestly sounding a bit like he just, I don't know, took acid and discovered the Left Behind novels.
The slogan of the Antichrist is peace and safety.
And while the connection between evangelicalism and Silicon Valley might seem weird, in Jesus and John Wayne, Dumas traces the alliances between evangelicals and the military technology industry and the emergence of neoliberalism. So it shouldn't shock us that evangelicals would at least be fascinated by a new era of tech fueled in equal parts by the logic of capitalism and the logic of expansive militarism. But something that makes less sense is how a non-Christian has been the key to evangelicals gaining political and military power in the United States. A question that hangs over the contemporary American Christian nationalist movement is how in the hell did this movement ultimately coalesce around and take power via a man who seems only slightly more Christian than Osama bin Laden?
I'm wondering what one or two of your most favored Bible verses are and why.
I wouldn't want to get into it because to me that's very personal. You know, when I talk about the Bible, it's very personal, so I don't want to get into verses. I don't want to get into...
There's no verse that means a lot to you that you think about or cite?
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics.
Even to cite a verse that you like?
No, I don't want to do that.
You're an Old Testament guy or a New Testament guy?
Probably equal. I think it's just an incredible... The whole Bible is an incredible... I joke very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time. But I just think the Bible is just something very special.
Let me know in the comments if you're more or less Christian than Osama bin Laden. We can see the roots of this by jumping back to Bruce Barron's 1925 book, The Man Nobody Knows, which Dumas talks about in the book Jesus and John Wayne. Now, according to Dumas, Barron made the Christian businessman the prototype of Christian manhood. He depicted Jesus as the world's greatest business executive. His Jesus was a winner, a strong, magnetic man, the kind who could inspire great enthusiasm and build great organizations. Now, while some might mistakenly associate Jesus with loving his enemies, healing the sick, or I don't know, feeding the poor, the prophets of American evangelicalism instead painted Jesus as good at business. Now, this might seem at odds with the other dominant evangelical logic emerging around that time, which viewed Christ as a soldier on the battlefield. But as the 20th century moved forward, Dumas notes that the neoconservative agenda meshed exceedingly well with evangelical militarism. So while we might not see Trump as a stereotypically masculine figure, as the battlefield moved from the beaches of Normandy to the high rises of Manhattan, Trump embodies a type of masculinity that's seen as useful for the evangelical mission. Dumas writes that for evangelicals, there were warriors on the actual field of battle, and there were those who emerged victorious in the rough and tumble world of capitalism. And for many, no one had been more victorious in the war of capitalism than Donald Trump. You know, he's a real estate mogul turned reality star, made rich by selling his naming rights to developers. You know, and even though Jesus once said that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God, well, evangelicals saw his wealth as a strength rather than a liability. And his utter lack of ideological conviction made him the perfect avatar of both free market logic and the increasingly theologically shallow world of American evangelicalism.
I'm very pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. I hate it. I hate everything it stands for. I cringe when I listen to people debating the subject. But I just believe in choice. You
know, Trump's professional trajectory from slumlord to real estate scammer to some failed casinos to monetizing his name to crypto scams to his own line of branded Bibles all embody the raw logic of wealth and power, and specifically wealth and power for a very particular type of person. White guys. Even if he had no real evidence of personal faith or belief, this paradoxically made him a better vessel for American evangelicalism than candidates who were actually Christian, which included most of the people that initially ran against him in 2016. And we know from experience that the one-time evangelicals actually had one of their own in the White House, they fucking hated him. You know, Jimmy Carter was a Southern evangelical practicing Christian Sunday school teacher who practiced his faith openly. But letting his faith rather than militaristic or free market values determine his politics quickly made him an enemy of the very community from which he came. In case this is just one thing you're watching during a marathon goon session, to be clear, the point there is that the president that the Christians hated the most was the Christian guy because he wanted to do Christian stuff less than he wanted to do capitalist and military stuff. And they hated that. Carter's Christian beliefs literally made him a liability to the evangelical community. On the flip side, the lack of coherent beliefs makes Trump the perfect leader for evangelicals. As Dumez writes, evangelicals were looking for a protector, an aggressive, heroic, manly man, someone who wasn't restrained by political correctness or feminine virtues, someone who would break the rules for the right cause. One of his religious biographers said he was the ultimate fighting champion for evangelicals. MMA, these people can't stop talking about MMA. There's so many examples you could use of someone that Jesus would be like, and the example they keep coming back to is people with like neck tats that go in a cage and beat the shit out of someone else who has CTE. That's the number one example. I mean, take Trump's answer to what his favorite book of the Bible is.
The Bible means a lot to me, but I don't want to get into specifics. The whole Bible is an incredible, I joke, very much so. They always hold up the Art of the Deal. I say my second favorite book of all time.
Rather than indicating a lack of familiarity with evangelical culture, this perfectly encapsulates a faith that's grounded in personal experience and revelation, in which
I am not going to win this scenario. So let's just start an actual game until John gets back. I got some banger videos though.
Individual salvation is more important than participating in any historically or theologically grounded community. It's very much a theology and politics as vibes sort of situation. And in fact, the modern canon of evangelical theology has in many ways been created by cultural trends and market forces. Dumez writes about how national Christian bookstores have consistently been more willing to stock books advocating for patriarchal, militaristic, and nationalistic theology than texts that question those values. And for younger Christians, these bookstores were often seen as offering proper Christian texts. So when books that border on white nationalism are on the shelves and works of liberation theology or feminist theology are not, well, they're kind of telling you who the enemy is. And this leads to an intellectual culture in which, for conservatives, a defense of white patriarchy emerged as a unifying thread across this range of issues. For conservative evangelicals, a defense of white patriarchy would move to the center of their coalescing cultural and political identity. Which is why it's not shocking to see Kristi Noem praying with ICE agents before they go off to terrorize brown people. I mean, we can contrast this with the response to the same issues by a more traditionally theological and hierarchical form of Christianity, Catholicism. Recently, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops put out a statement condemning the acts of ICE agents and emphasizing the humanity and dignity of all people, regardless of immigration status.
We are concerned about the conditions in detention centers and the lack of access to pastoral care.
And according to the logic of this faith tradition, you can't simply decide to be a Catholic and be pro-ICE. You know, instead by being on...
Who are we playing? Which leader are we playing? Pick one for me. Pick someone. Pick a country. Pick a country, and I will pick a leader from that country, and we'll do that. And you know what? Fuck it. What am I focusing? What victory am I going for? Let's pick the... Let's see if I can do this. We want Vietnam? France? Ugh. The French. India. Chandragupta. Can declare a war of territorial expansion after gaining military training. Civic. Interesting. Cleopatra. 15% production towards wonders if placed next to a river. Does not receive damage from floods. Interesting. Potomac. Cyrus. Persia trade routes. Phoenicia. A woman? As in English? Templar. Can I... Oh my god. Can I... Oh boy. If they've got Templar, and that's a unit, can I wage Holy War? And if I wage Holy War, and I make all the other civs, Muslim civs, I could do the crusade. A longbowman. Sea Dog. Royal Navy. Gandhi. Indonesia. Hammurabi. Norway. Portugal. Stalin. Buildings in their campus and industrial zones. Yield culture and tourism equal to half there. Yield Soviet per hoda. Ah, John's back. We don't even need to start a game. We can just get straight back into the other one. Norograd, a standalone district unique to the Soviet Union for scientific progress. Ooh, T-34s. Cool. Sweden, the Nobel Prize, you get Diplo favor. So what, Sweden seems like a Diplo victory. Diplo and culture? Different China guy. Eurekas and inspirations. 50% of them. That's pretty good. Chinese unique support available with military training, civic, adjacent military, cavalry, anti-cavalry, and range units. Get combat strength. Chinese unique medieval era ranged unit replacing the crossbowman. Can attack twice per turn. Damn. Chinese unique medieval era unit range of 1 and high combat strength. Interesting. And the Great Wall. And then what? I wish it wouldn't go away. There we go. Great Wall. 2 gold provides increased defensive bonuses. If adjacent to segments, additional culture and tourism. It's an interesting civ. Marta, what is this? What the fuck is Marta? What is this person? Mapuche. I don't know where that is. I don't know what that is meant to be. Maori, Mongolia. That's not Genghis Khan. Mali. Huh. Hungary. 50% reduction towards districts and buildings constructed across a river from a city center. That's so specific. Hungarian unique medieval era unit range.
Did you just say you didn't know what the Maya and the Mapuche are?
It wasn't Maya. Was it Maya?
Yeah, go back up.
Oh, it is Maya. I thought it was a T. I wasn't looking properly.
Actually, read what her ability does.
Settling adjacent to fresh water and coast does not provide extra housing. Instead, each farm provides an additional housing and production for every adjacent observatory, and gold and amenity for every luxury adjacent to the city center. Holy shit. So you build tall with her then?
Yeah, so you see, because her leader ability, you have to be within 6 tiles of the city. Right? So you build like a flower, and the science is what gives you the housing.
Ah, that's interesting.
Yeah, she's cool. And then the Mapuche, we've talked about them. They're the indigenous South American rebels.
Ah, okay. From whereabouts, like Peru kind of area, or a bit north?
Yeah. The Andes.
Yeah, okay.
Region.
They like chinchillas, but people.
Mapuche rebel groups and stuff.
Oh, there's an Ethiopia one. International trade routes gain faith. Faith provides resources. Improve resources provide faith. Each copy of the city owns can purchase archaeological museums and archaeologists with faith. Cool. Mm.
The real broken civ is Yondel at the bottom.
Hey, this is the Mongolia guy.
Yeah, Kublai Khan. I don't know why it's highlighting him.
Ah, different guy.
Yeah.
All cities.
And because of the mod, his archers will always have 2 shots, so when they get upgraded to field cannons, they can shoot twice, making them even more broken.
Because the other...
His leader ability is insane.
The other chick from
to just
China.
convert your production of food to massively grow your city.
Sorry, it was this one that had the crouching tiger as well.
Yeah, yeah. There's a few Chinas.
Oh, they all have the crouching tiger on the Great Wall. Okay.
Yeah, so the only thing that will be different is the leader power. So the nation will always have the same stuff for the most part. There are some exceptions, like Teddy Roosevelt. Only the Rough Rider Teddy Roosevelt gets Rough Rider units. She might be an exception too. Like the Age of Steam, she might have a different thing there. If you go to below this one. She's got so much to read, you know?
Yeah, this one, Age of Steam.
Yeah, so she doesn't have red coats in Age of Steam.
Ah. Oh, there are red coats. Lol. Fuck the red coats. I will never play Victoria because fuck the red coats. They will always be the enemy, so I can kill red coats.
That's the alternate Japan.
Oh, Tokugawa, yeah. International trade routes. Receive negative 25% yield. That's so funny. Alright, let's get to the multiplayer. I'm gonna move you up to the other screen. Move the video down.
On the side of ICE, you are actively going against your theological...
Did you want to screen share Civ? So you can screen share audio?
Yeah, just give me a second.
Because I was getting doubled up before, but I got saved. Someone finally came in and was like, "Hey, audio's fucked."
Yeah, that's why you gotta listen.
Yeah. Well, the problem was that the audio for my headset is coming through my computer, so it's it doubles up when it hits my headphones because it also hits the stream. And I'm sure there's a way to fix that. I'm just not sure how. Did you invite?
I believe so. It says invited.
Okay. Hey, there's a battle royale. Okay, I think Civ is broken right now.
It does that.
Yeah.
Tradition. Unless you're noted Catholic J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance is the one Catholic who can be a Catholic, but then disagree with the Catholic Church about everything because, I don't know, he went to Yale or something. I don't know.
Yay.
Also, Pope Leo, if you are listening, please excommunicate J.D. Vance. If you do, and I swear to God, I will root for the White Sox for one full season. Pope Leo, come on. Just excommunicate Vance, and for a full season, Michael O'Neill Burns becomes the biggest White Sox fan in the world. Well, there is an obvious theological coherency in Oscar Romero encouraging Christians to not commit human rights violations in the name of the state or the military, and Catholic bishops calling for a universal conception of social justice and humanity. The evangelicals have utilized the emptiness of their tradition to argue for other types of stuff They like other types of things.
What is the connection between furries, pornography, transgenderism, and political violence? Well, there seems to be a link.
This brings us back to young martyr Samantha Fulnecki. While she could have at least attempted to engage with some sort of academic literature to make an argument about traditional conceptions of gender, she instead pulled the classic evangelical move of...
What was that?
I just heard a weird squeal like Asian noise.
Don't worry about that. Just being a little turd.
Vague Asian noise.
A what noise?
A vague Asian noise.
Yes, that is correct. Oh, you put your difficulty up as well.
Yeah, I don't know if it does anything.
I think it just reduces your yields.
Maybe when it steals my turn.
Maybe. I imagine it just makes you. I imagine it just makes your yields a little lower.
Just sort of, just saying shit, just saying whatever you feel like, and being like, God is in me, so whatever I say is God or something.
I didn't mean for that to be offensive, but the truth will naturally offend people, and so I think that's why people are kind of viewing that as offensive.
In this way, the more classical relationship between faith and reason becomes the very dumb combination of faith and fanaticism, or faith as fanaticism. This lack of moral, theological, or ethical core renders American evangelicalism fundamentally meaningless. It's little more than a cultural shell or brand that encompasses the type of white, masculine, individualist ethos that connects the line of great men ranging from John Wayne to Charlie Kirk to Donald Trump.
Someone who says that I'm against abortion, but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants who are in the United States. I don't know if that's pro-life. So they're very complex issues. I don't know if anyone has all the truth on them, but I would ask first and foremost that there be greater respect for one another.
Okay, but at this point, I need to be fair and give credit where credit is due. Because currently, a black artist has been #1 on the evangelical Christian charts, which does complicate the narrative about the white supremacy inherent in evangelical culture. The black artist in question here is he's AI. It's a computer person. It's not a real guy that exists in the world. It's a computer person made it's a guy made on the computer, not a real guy. You couldn't go see this guy in concert because he's a computer. Does that make sense? And he was created by a MAGA rapper who notably performed in DC on January 6th. And I honestly think that this right here is the perfect encapsulation of the state of American evangelical culture. You know, the #1 Christian singer doesn't even have a soul. You know, they're an AI constructed simulacrum created using the tools of the hyper-capitalist Silicon Valley to achieve algorithmic success and create new revenue streams for its creator. And we shouldn't be shocked that evangelicals are skilled at performing and profiting off of a culture of soulless consumption, as they've been doing it for years. And in many ways, they were at the forefront of perfecting a version of digital capitalism. And now they've created a new and immaterial form of cultural and religious practice. One where AI singers can fill the room with the Holy Spirit, and AI pastors can answer your questions about theology, and where new Christian AI platforms might even help bring about the second coming of Christ. That's a real thing. That is a real thing, by the way. I'm not making things up. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not exaggerating. It's a real thing.
Jesus was born out of a virgin mother. What's more virgin than a computer? If Jesus does return, even if Jesus was a physical person in the past,
I love that this
you don't think
literally
that he could return as artificial intelligence?
Literally is real, and not AI itself. Because I have already seen this, so I know it's real. But if I didn't have pretext, I would have thought this was a promo thing for AI that an AI artist was doing.
My game might have crashed. I'm waiting for it. But it's currently very white on my screen.
See, what I don't have is science. But you're doing fine in science.
Alright, let's see if I can open up and join your game directly. This might actually work. Don't change the turn. I might be able to join without you.
Yeah. I wasn't going to change it. I guess we'll go for sewers to
Wait,
fix our housing.
you don't have oil yet?
No, I went for coal instead.
Damn. I'm way ahead of you in science.
It wouldn't take me. It would only take me a few turns to get oil. But I'm going for sanitation first, which is only going to take me one turn.
My problem at the moment is that because I've focused so much on getting science and developing my cities, I'm not getting eurekas. So I'm starting to slow down in my science, which is an issue.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is knowing the eurekas. That's something that comes with time. You know, like own 2 privateers for the electricity eureka.
Yeah, that's one I didn't get because I haven't been building ships.
Build 2 forts in your territory. I don't build forts, period.
I don't either, honestly. I have the military engineers. I could build 2 forts, but Why?
There's no need to.
I'm not getting attacked.
The AI isn't strong enough to really do anything.
I could maybe build forts on the Roman border.
Yeah, that's where you put them, is the edge of your territory. Normally. Oh, game is waiting on me? Are you back in?
No.
It says connected. So, you have been warned? Poundmaker's mad at me because I have a golden age?
Seriously?
I guess.
I'd imagine the whole world. It's a Christianity where creating content and selling crypto coins matters more than feeding the poor or questioning principalities and powers. I can't not note here that my guy Pope Leo has recently spoken out about AI.
Be careful that your use of AI
City is
does
starving.
not limit your true human growth. Use it in such a way that if it disappeared tomorrow, you would still know how to think, how to create, how to act on your own, how to form authentic friendships.
And listen, I get it too. You could be watching this and you might be thinking, like,
that's good advice.
Hey, Michael, haven't Catholics done some stuff? Haven't they done some stuff before? Haven't they? You seen movie Spotlight, among other things? I get it. I get it. I'm simply saying, in this contemporary instance, it's an example of a type of Christian practice that at least has been against, genocide and forms of white supremacy and ICE and AI. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to mass this weekend. You know what I mean? I'm not an altar boy. I'm too old. But this lack of humanity and embrace of slop is at the heart of the new evangelical culture. And this culture has about as much intellectual and theological depth as the AI slop that so many Christians are just falling in love with.
Is this all the fucking AI slop? Great. That's awesome.
You in?
Yeah. Sorry.
American evangelicalism as a cultural and political project is completely wedded to a culture of consumption. This leads to the support of any political leader or system that promises to protect the mechanisms of consumption at all costs. In this way, it's little more than a spiritual veneer to American capitalism and militarism. And while it's very tempting to try to own these folks by pointing out their own theological incoherence, this would be as useful as trying to explain to a CEO that the capitalism is actually bad because profits are at the expense of working people, No, he doesn't know, because the profit is the whole point. Or as a great Canadian poet once said, all that money, the money is the motive. It's honestly hard for me to see American evangelicalism as something worth reclaiming. And at best, I think we can just hope for it to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. Because while I haven't just straight up said this yet, here's the dirty little secret at the heart of all of this. American evangelicalism and Christian nationalism more broadly is little more than the logic of capitalism with a Bible verse tattooed on its lower back. And it's been so successful because it's tapped into the individualist, white supremacist, free market logic that is at the heart of American capitalism. But guys, it goes deeper than this. Because evangelicalism didn't just become so dominant by doing capitalism. Capitalism became so dominant because in many ways it's just been doing religion. So in the third and hopefully final video of this series, I'm going to talk about the relationship between capitalism and religion, and in particular the unholy union of capitalism and American evangelicalism. And then I want to talk about how Christianity has been taken seriously by marginalized, oppressed, and colonized people. And when they do it, it actually looks a lot like radical anti-capitalist politics. It almost looks like they're doing communism. Uh-oh, Billy Graham. Uh-oh, Charlie Kirk. Uh-oh, James Dobson.
Billy
Uh-oh,
Graham.
Samantha Fulnecki. What's going to happen? And I wanted to say thank you so much for your reactions to my last video on my journey of becoming a sort of Christian atheist. I read the comments. I really liked some of the emails I got from you all. It means a lot to me that video connected with some of your own journeys and stories. It's so nice when we can do something human via this very unhuman platform. Please check that video out if you haven't already. And thank you for all the recommendations for things to look into for this video. That's actually how I found out about the book Jesus and John Wayne. One of you told me to read it. So thank you so much for that. And again, you gave me so much to think about that I think I'm going to make one more video in this series unless you tell me not to. But if you want video number 3, please tell me to do it. As a reminder, this channel is primarily funded via my Patreon. So if you like this sort of work and you want more of it, please consider signing up. I promise if you do, your life will not be any more or less blessed. There's no spiritual reward for supporting my channel and my team on Patreon. And thank you so much to all of my current patrons, especially my biggest dogs. You are the followers of the one true faith, and together we will journey through this digital desert on our way to a new promised land. And in the meantime, if you come from a really Christian family, bring a bunch of this up at Christmas, go home for Christmas, be with your family, make it weird, bring stuff up from this video and my other one, make it uncomfortable, and then let me know how uncomfortable you make it. Leave a comment or shoot me an email, and I'll tell those stories on an upcoming stream or something like that. Okay, thank you. God bless. I'm gonna go bomb some boats now because of Christ.
Okay, I do want to watch that one, but this is one of the ones that I wanted to show you.
Depleted uranium sounds like something that should glow, hum, or trigger alarms when you stand too close to it. In reality, it does none of those things, and that misunderstanding is where most every argument about DU starts off on the wrong foot. Uranium is not magic. It's not a bomb waiting to go off. It's simply a very heavy metal that happens to be weakly radioactive and extremely inconvenient once you're done using the part you actually wanted. When uranium is mined, it contains several isotopes. One of them, uranium-235, is the useful one. That isotope is what powers nuclear reactors and nuclear weapons. The enrichment process separates that rare isotope from the rest. Once it's removed, what remains is uranium that is mostly uranium-238. That leftover material is called depleted uranium. It's less radioactive than the original ore, not more. It will not explode, melt down, or irradiate a city by existing. It just sits there, heavy, stable, and produced in enormous quantities. By the height of the Cold War, the United States had stockpiled massive amounts of this material. Cylinders of depleted uranium were stacked and stored across government facilities with no clear long-term plan. Disposal was expensive, permanent storage was politically ugly, and pretending it did not exist was not an option. To nuclear engineers, DU was waste. To military engineers, it looked suspiciously like opportunity. The reason is simple: density. Depleted uranium is about 70% denser than lead. It is one of the densest materials you can reasonably work with in industrial quantities. Density matters because when you throw something very heavy at something else very fast, physics does most of the work for you. You do not need explosives. You do not need clever fuses. You just need mass and velocity, and DU has mass in abundance. There was also cost. Tungsten was the other obvious candidate for armor-piercing applications, but tungsten has problems. It was expensive, required foreign sourcing, and came with supply chain vulnerabilities that made Cold War planners nervous. Depleted uranium, on the other hand, was already paid for. The government had mountains of it and no good use for it. Turning a disposal problem into a battlefield advantage was not just appealing, it was bureaucratically elegant. This is where the story of DU stops being about radiation and starts being about incentives. The military did not adopt depleted uranium because it sounded scary or exotic. It adopted it because it solved multiple problems at once. It reduced nuclear waste stockpiles, It outperformed existing penetrator materials, and it did all of that at a lower cost than the alternatives. From a weapons deployment perspective, this is as close to a perfect solution as you could get. What almost no one discussed at the time was what would happen after the shot was fired. Weapons development focuses on effectiveness at the moment of impact. Environmental persistence, health exposure, and long-term consequences tend to be someone else's problem later. DU was evaluated as a solid metal projectile. The possibility it could become a fine, inhalable dust under battlefield conditions was not front and center in early planning. That omission matters because it sets the tone for everything that follows. Depleted uranium was never introduced as a sinister weapon. It was introduced as a practical one, a dense metal looking for a job, in a military culture obsessed with winning the next armor war before it ever started. And once the Cold War arms race pointed directly at Soviet tank divisions, depleted uranium found its purpose. And it did all of that in the 50s and early 1960s. The United States Army was obsessed with one very specific nightmare. It did not involve nuclear missiles, strategic bombers, or mushroom clouds. It involved thousands of Soviet tanks pouring through the Fulda Gap, grinding their way into Western Europe before NATO could even finish arguing about whose turn it was to respond. Soviet doctrine emphasized massed armor, speed, and overwhelming force, and American planners understood that if they lost the armor fight, the rest of the war would be academic. The problem was that tanks were getting better faster than ammunition was. Early post-war anti-armor rounds relied on shape charges and conventional penetrators, both of which had limits. As armor thickness increased and sloping became more aggressive, defeating it required either smarter explosives or brute physics. Explosives had their place, but they came with complexity, reliability issues, and diminishing returns against well-designed armor. Physics, on the other hand, never argued back. This is where kinetic energy penetrators took center stage. The idea was brutally simple. Fire a long, narrow rod at extreme velocity and let mass and speed do the killing. The faster and denser the rod, the more the penetration. Tungsten became the early favorite. It was heavy, strong, and could survive the most violent acceleration inside a tank gun. But as testing continued, engineers noticed something frustrating. Under extreme impact stress, tungsten tended to flatten out and fracture. It worked, but it did not scale as well as planners wanted against the next generation of Soviet armor. Depleted uranium entered the conversation almost accidentally. Researchers comparing materials noticed that uranium alloys behaved differently when they hit armor. Instead of mushrooming, they failed in a way that preserved the sharp penetrating point. This behavior, later understood as a diabatic shear, meant DU rods stayed narrow and aggressive as they punched through steel. Every test that pushed the limits of velocity and armor thickness seemed to favor uranium. The Cold War context mattered. This was not a peacetime research environment where caution ruled the day. It was a technological arms race driven by fear of being second best. If the Soviets fielded a tank NATO could not reliably kill, the consequences would not be theoretical. They would be measured in destroyed units and dead crews. That pressure shaped every decision. When test results showed uranium outperforming tungsten, the response was not hesitation, it was acceleration. There was also an unspoken advantage that planners appreciated, even if they rarely said it out loud. Depleted uranium was already in government hands. The nuclear weapons complex had created vast stockpiles, and nobody had a politically easy plan to get rid of them. Using DU and ammunition meant turning a strategic liability into a tactical asset. It reduced storage burdens, avoided disposal costs, and fit neatly into existing military supply systems. For a bureaucracy, that was a rare alignment of interests. By the 1970s, depleted uranium was no longer an experiment. It was being engineered into full-scale penetrators designed specifically for future main battle tanks. As the Abrams program took shape, DU became part of the answer to the Soviet armor problem. The tank was designed around the assumption that it would fire ammunition capable of defeating anything it faced head-on. None of this happened in public view. DU adoption was quiet, technical, and almost entirely internal. The debate was about penetration curves and metallurgy, not health risks or environmental persistence. Those questions existed, but they were secondary to the overriding goal of winning a hypothetical war that everyone hoped would remain hypothetical. By the time the Cold War began to thaw, depleted uranium had already secured its place in U.S. armor doctrine. The only thing left was to see whether it would ever be tested under real combat conditions. When the Cold War finally ended, it did not go out with a nuclear exchange or a tank battle in Europe. It ended quietly, with the Soviet Union collapsing under its own weight. For a brief moment, it looked like decades of armor planning and ammunition development might never be tested at all. Then Saddam Hussein rolled into Kuwait, and the United States suddenly had a real battlefield on which to find out whether all that Cold War preparation had actually been worth it. The Iraqi army entered the Gulf War with confidence. On paper, it fielded one of the largest armored forces in the world. Thousands of tanks, many of them Soviet designed, backed by artillery, infantry, and hardened defensive positions. The expectation was not that Iraq would win, but that it would at least impose costs. What followed instead was a one-sided demonstration of what happens when modern Western fire control meets ammunition designed with no margin for mercy. For the M1A1 Abrams, Desert Storm was a proving ground. The tank's fire control system, thermal sights, and mobility already gave it a significant edge. The ammunition finished the job. M829 series depleted uranium rounds tore through Iraqi tanks at ranges that made return fire irrelevant. DU did not care about sloped armor, older composite designs, or optimistic Soviet brochures. When the rod hit, the armor stopped being armor and started being debris.
That's true.
Inside the target, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The DU penetrator punched through steel and ignited fragments of itself as it went. Burning uranium particles sprayed the interior of the vehicle, shredding equipment, igniting fuel, and turning confined spaces into lethal ovens.
Yes.
Crews were incapacitated almost instantly. Many Iraqi tankers abandoned vehicles that were technically still operable simply because they had seen what happened to the ones that were hit. From the air, the A-10 Warthog delivered its own introduction to depleted uranium. The GAU-8 cannon fired 30mm rounds with DU penetrators that chewed through armored vehicles, artillery pieces, and anything else unlucky enough to be caught in the open. The visual aftermath shocked even seasoned observers. Vehicles were not just destroyed, they were gutted, burned from the inside out, and left scattered across the desert in pieces that looked less like combat damage and more like industrial accidents. But Desert Storm also produced DU's first unintentional consequences. Friendly fire incidents involving Abram tanks meant U.S. crews were suddenly exposed to the same effects DU inflicted on enemy armor. Recovery teams climbing into burned vehicles found fine black residue coating surfaces and equipment. That residue was uranium oxide, created when DU burned and aerosolized. At the time, few people understood what that meant. Protective gear was inconsistent, guidance was vague. The assumption was that whatever risks existed were minimal compared to the dangers of combat itself. As the war ended, attention focused on victory. The ground campaign lasted only 100 hours. Iraqi armored forces were shattered. The Abrams emerged with an almost mythic reputation, and DU was a large part of that story. The performance validated decades of Cold War assumptions. If NATO ever had to fight massed armor, this is how it would look. What did not receive the same attention were the questions left behind. Burned out tanks sat in the desert.
If I clear a rainforest, is that going to give me farmland?
If it's flat,
how do I tell?
Yes. If it's on a hill, no. It'll just tell you, highlight the tile. Also, if there's a production gear on it, it's a hill. If there's 2 food, it's a plain.
It's 2 food. Okay. Okay. I am clearing that shit for farms because this city is desperately in need of it. And clearing it will give me production. So I can build my campus while clearing areas. Works for me. Ow. I'm getting almost 160 gold per turn.
Contaminated with uranium dust.
Thank you.
DU fragments lay scattered across the battlefield. Soldiers who had worked inside damaged vehicles went home without any clear understanding of what they had been exposed to. In the glow of success, these issues were easy to ignore. Desert Storm proved beyond any doubt that depleted uranium worked exactly as intended. It also ensured that DU would never again be just a technical detail buried in procurement documents. The battlefield had given it a reputation, and with that reputation came scrutiny. The next time DU appeared in combat, the world would be paying much closer attention. Once depleted uranium left the realm of theory and entered combat, the obvious question became how it actually did what it did. Not in dramatic terms, but in mechanical ones. DU is not powerful because it is radioactive or mysterious. It is powerful because of how it behaves under extreme stress, and that behavior is governed by physics, not hype. A depleted uranium round used by a tank is a kinetic energy penetrator. It does not explode. It does not rely on chemical energy. Instead, it uses velocity. Inside the gun barrel sits a long, narrow rod made of uranium
It seems
alloy.
like I can
That rod is surrounded by a
build
sabot,
housing
a
on
lightweight
hills
sleeve that
now?
allows it to fit snugly in the barrel. When the gun fires, the sabot drops away
sometimes,
almost immediately
maybe.
after leaving the muzzle, and the rod
might
continues
have
forward alone
an
at several
attack to do
kilometers
it.
per second. At those speeds, penetration becomes a matter of momentum transfer. The denser the rod, the more momentum it carries. Depleted uranium is dense enough that even a relatively small diameter rod can deliver enormous energy to a very small
An
area
inanimate
of armor.
carbon rod.
This concentrates force in a way that overwhelms steel and composite
I have a
materials
boost
alike.
to fascism.
But density alone does not explain why DU outperformed other heavy metals. The key difference lies in how DU fails on impact. Most metals subjected to extreme stress deform outward. They mushroom, flatten, or fracture, spreading energy sideways and reducing penetration depth. Depleted uranium behaves differently. Under the intense pressure and heat of impact, it undergoes a diabatic shear. Thin layers of material at the point of contact shear off in a controlled way, leaving the core of the rod sharp and narrow. As outer layers peel away, the penetrator effectively sharpens itself as it bores deeper into the armor. This self-sharpening effect allows DU rods to maintain penetration efficiency at depths where other materials begin to fail. The harder the impact, the more pronounced the effect becomes. It is counterintuitive, but DU becomes more effective the more violently it is used. Engineers did not design this behavior intentionally. They discovered it, verified it, and built weapons around it. Once the rod penetrates the armor, DU's other defining characteristic comes into play. Uranium is pyrophoric. When fragments break off under high stress, they ignite on contact with air. Inside a tank, this produces a cloud of burning metal particles. These particles ignite fuel vapors, shred wiring and equipment, and raise temperatures rapidly. Even if the penetrator itself misses the crew, the after armor effects are often fatal. The interior of a struck vehicle becomes a confined firestorm. Ammunition cooks off, hydraulic fluid ignites, oxygen is consumed. Survival depends less on armor thickness and more on luck. This is why DU hits are so often described as catastrophic rather than merely damaging. The rod does not need to destroy the tank structurally. It only needs to turn the inside into a place humans cannot remain.
That's true.
Compared to early tungsten designs, DU delivered more consistent results across a wider range of impact angles and armor configurations. Tungsten could penetrate, but it was less predictable. DU provided reliability, and reliability is what militaries value most. A weapon that works 90% of the time is less appealing than one that works 80% of the time, every time. The downside of all this efficiency is what happens to the material afterward. The same fragmentation and ignition that makes DU lethal also turns it into fine particles. Those particles do not vanish. They settle on surfaces, embed in soil, and become biologically available in ways solid metal never was. DU's battlefield brilliance is inseparable from the consequences it leaves behind. Understanding how DU works makes one thing clear. It was never a weapon chosen for intimidation or symbolism. It was chosen because it solved a technical problem better than anything else available. Everything that followed, from health concerns to environmental fallout, stems from that original decision to let physics win first and ask questions later. For all the attention depleted uranium gets as a weapon, the real concern begins after the shot is fired. Solid DU sitting in a storage bunker is not the problem. Even a fired penetrator buried intact into the ground is relatively stable. The danger appears when DU stops behaving like a solid object and starts behaving like air pollution. That transformation happens instantly when a DU round strikes armor. At the moment of impact, temperatures spike high enough to vaporize part of the penetrator. Fragments shear off, ignite, and oxidize into extremely fine particles. Some are visible as smoke or soot. Others are microscopic, small enough to bypass the body's natural defenses and lodge deep in the lungs when inhaled. This is the form of DU that matters from a health perspective, because once uranium enters the body, it plays by a very different set of rules. Uranium presents two separate hazards. The first is chemical toxicity. Uranium is a heavy metal, similar in some respects to lead or mercury. When absorbed into the bloodstream, it tends to accumulate in the kidneys, where it can damage tissue and impair function. This effect has been well understood since the early days of nuclear research. The second hazard is radiological. Depleted uranium emits alpha radiation, which is not dangerous outside the body, but becomes relevant when radioactive material is inhaled or embedded in tissue. Alpha particles deposit their energy over a very short distance, meaning internal exposure can damage nearby cells, even at low levels. Exposure pathways on the battlefield varied widely. Tank crews inside vehicles struck by DU were exposed to the highest concentrations. Recovery teams working inside burned-out armor encountered residual dust coating interior surfaces. Mechanics, firefighters, and engineers often entered contaminated vehicles without respiratory protection because they were not trained to expect radioactive heavy metal exposure. In the chaos of post-battle operations, the priority was recovering equipment, not collecting air samples. Embedded fragments represented a particularly troubling scenario. Soldiers wounded by DU shrapnel sometimes carried small uranium fragments in their bodies for years. These fragments slowly corroded, releasing uranium into surrounding tissue in the bloodstream. Medical follow-up showed elevated uranium levels in some of these individuals decades after exposure. Removing the fragments was not always possible without causing further injury, leaving affected veterans in a kind of permanent monitoring limbo. As veterans returned home, reports of unexplained symptoms began to surface. Fatigue, joint pain, headaches, respiratory problems, and cognitive issues were reported by some Gulf War veterans, fueling what became known as Gulf War syndrome. DU was quickly proposed as a possible cause, but proving that link turned out to be extremely difficult. The Gulf War environment exposed troops to oil fire smoke, pesticides, nerve agent alarms, stress, vaccines, and a cocktail of industrial pollutants. Isolating DU as a single causal factor was scientifically challenging and politically fraught. Studies produced mixed results. Some showed measurable uranium in urine samples years after deployment. Others found no statistically significant differences between exposed and unexposed groups. Sample sizes were often small. Exposure levels were rarely quantified at time of contact. Records were incomplete. The result was a body of evidence that suggested risk under certain conditions, but stopped short of delivering definitive conclusions. Military and government agencies responded cautiously. The Department of Veterans Affairs established monitoring programs for veterans with known DU exposure, particularly those with embedded fragments. These programs acknowledged the possibility of long-term effects without conceding widespread harm. To critics, this looked like evasion. To defenders, it looked like responsible medicine in the face of uncertainty. The uncomfortable reality is that DU health effects depend heavily on dose and circumstance. A soldier passing through a contaminated area briefly faces far less risk than someone inside a burning tank. Most exposed individuals likely experience levels too low to cause measurable harm. A smaller group may not have been so lucky. That uneven distribution of risk makes DU difficult to categorize as either safe or dangerous in absolute terms. What all that makes clear is that DU's health controversy was not born from hysteria. It emerged from real exposure events, incomplete data, and a weapon that behaved differently than planners anticipated once it left the firing line. DU did exactly what it was designed to do in combat. The problem was that consequences did not end when the fighting stopped. If depleted uranium created health concerns at the individual level, it created an entirely different kind of problem at the environmental level. People rotate home from wars, landscapes do not. Once DU enters soil, water, and air, it becomes part of the local environment, whether anyone wants it there or not. And
didn't they do soil samples where it really wasn't that bad? Like in Iraq, they're like, oh, birth defects.
No, the soil sample test was in Yugoslavia.
Oh, it was Yugoslavia.
Where the A10s were used more.
And there was still no significant impact,
specifically in its links to the birth defects. By blaming DU in Iraq for the birth defects. So they specifically looked into the UN looked into birth defects in that region. It doesn't say that it didn't contaminate the soil.
I see.
Just that that specific research is what I cite about the birth defects argument.
Yes. Okay. That makes sense. I just wanted to clarify. Considering we are talking about this, might as well clarify that kind of thing.
But it was not a problem really in Yugoslavia. So the question is also, what is the difference between... Because it was almost exclusively used in the A10s there. So what is the difference between that and like a massive armor battle like the Gulf War was? You know, like maybe the delivery system matters a little bit more because like the A10 is also good at like you know, like strafing buildings, you know, because it's very inaccurate. So it's like kind of good to strafe buildings with it. And it also has like a psychological factor when it's strafing that building because you hear
with
it.
the
It's
sound
ripping through it's like the Stukas with Germany.
Yeah.
They deliberately further like enhance the plane to make that textbook dive bomb sound.
Which I think the Zeros did that as well, right? The Japanese planes.
I mean, the planes just make that sound when they're diving. But I believe that might not be true. That might be pop history.
Yeah, okay.
But I believe that Germany did do that. But that might just be, you know, how they amplify how good Germany's shit was.
Yeah.
You know what's really good, Germany? Replaceable parts. Universal and replaceable parts.
DU does not conveniently degrade on a human timescale. When a DU penetrator strikes armor or hard ground, part of it remains intact, while part of it oxidizes into uranium compounds. These compounds range from relatively insoluble oxides to more chemically mobile forms that can migrate through soil under the right conditions. Rain, wind, temperature changes, and local soil chemistry all influence how far DU spreads. In arid regions, wind-driven dust becomes the dominant transport mechanism. In wetter environments, groundwater movement plays a larger role. The result is contamination that is uneven, localized, and extremely difficult to map with confidence. Post-war surveys in Kuwait and Iraq found DU fragments and elevated uranium concentrations at impact sites years after the fighting ended. In some locations, intact penetrators.
The workshops aren't as effective as mines? Or the lumber mills?
Well, to be clear, I do it to get the boost in production because I'm going to build a mine there anyway. So I haven't checked what's actually better. I know in tundra, lumber mills.
Yeah.
If you're in snow tiles, lumber mill. As many lumber mills as you can in those snow tiles.
Okay.
Because you won't be getting farming from it. And you still get one food from those tiles anyway.
Yes.
Were recovered just below the surface, barely disturbed since impact. In others, corrosion had already reduced the metal into fine particulate matter, indistinguishable from surrounding soil without laboratory analysis. This inconsistency made risk assessment frustrating. One area could show negligible contamination, while another, only a short distance away, produced measurable hotspots. The Balkans presented an even more uncomfortable scenario. DU strikes occurred closer to populated areas, farmland, and transportation routes. United Nations environmental teams documented penetrators embedded near villages, roadsides, and agricultural land. While most measured concentrations fell below levels considered immediately dangerous, the persistence of uranium in these environments raised long-term concerns. Once DU enters the soil used for crops or grazing, exposure pathways multiply and become far harder to control. Groundwater proved to be one of the most contentious issues. Uranium solubility depends heavily on chemical conditions, particularly oxygen levels and mineral content. In many cases, DU remained largely immobile. In others, measured uranium concentrations appeared in nearby water sources. Critics argued this posed unacceptable risks in regions already struggling with damaged infrastructure and limited access to clean water. Military and government assessments countered that many readings fell within natural background ranges. Both claims would be technically accurate, depending upon where, when, and how samples were taken. Cleanup efforts highlighted the scale of the problem. Locating DU contamination required specialized detectors, trained personnel, and access to terrain often littered with unexploded ordnance. Removing penetrators risked disturbing contaminated soil and spreading material further if not handled carefully. Full remediation was expensive, slow, and politically unattractive, especially in post-conflict regions where rebuilding hospitals, roads, and power grids understandably took priority. The United States faced its own DU legacy at home. Decades of testing at domestic ranges left behind contaminated debris and buried penetrators. Some sites were eventually closed or restricted, not only because of DU, but because of the cumulative environmental damage of long-term weapons testing. Cleanup costs ran into the billions, reinforcing an inconvenient truth. Using depleted uranium was cheap, but dealing with it afterward never was. The pattern is hard to ignore. Depleted uranium solved an immediate military problem with brutal efficiency, and in doing so it pushed the consequences somewhere else and into the future. The damage was not loud or immediate enough to matter at the moment decisions were made. It accumulated quietly, in soil, in water, and in places no one planned to revisit once the war was over. By the time those consequences demanded attention, DU had already done its job and moved on, leaving behind a problem that cannot be unfired or easily erased. By the time depleted uranium became an environmental concern, it was already a political one. Scientific studies did not arrive in a vacuum. They arrived in the middle of public fear, veteran advocacy, international tension, and governments that had a vested interest in the answers coming out a certain way. As a result, the research surrounding DU never settled into consensus so much as it fragmented into camps. From the military's perspective, the initial position was defensible. External radiation from DU was minimal. Chemical toxicity thresholds were understood. Most battlefield exposures, they argued, were far below levels known to cause harm. That position was supported by several studies showing no statistically significant increase in cancer or mortality among broad veteran populations. But statistics operate at population scale, and DU exposure was never evenly distributed. Averages concealed outliers, and outliers are where controversy lives. Independent researchers and environmental groups focused on those outliers. Tank crews inside struck vehicles, recovery teams, and individuals with embedded fragments represented a small but significant subset of exposed personnel. Studies examining these groups sometimes found elevated uranium levels or biological markers consistent with heavy metal exposure. Critics accused military-funded research of minimizing these findings. Military scientists responded that small sample sizes and confounding variables made definitive conclusion impossible. Both arguments were technically sound and politically useless. The political debate did not wait for better data. Media coverage tended to favor simple narratives, and DU did not lend itself to simplicity. Headlines oscillated between declarations of catastrophic poisoning and assurances of total safety. Nuance rarely survived the translation from peer-reviewed journals to television segments. Once uranium entered the conversation, public perception followed emotion rather than probability. Internationally, the issue shifted from science to law. Depleted uranium was never explicitly banned under international conventions. It did not qualify as a nuclear weapon, as it involved no fission or fusion. It was not classified as a chemical weapon, since its primary purpose was kinetic destruction rather than poisoning.
Both
that
argue
left it
there's
in a legal
technically
gap where
sound.
effectiveness and intent mattered more than long-term consequences. Humanitarian groups argued that DU violated principles against unnecessary suffering and long-term environmental harm.
I think that's
Military
the
legal
strongest
advisors
argument
counted
against
that
it.
DU was no more indiscriminate than any other anti-arms.
It was unnecessary suffering.
Yeah. Like, the thing is, not back then, now.
Yeah.
Like, the main reason to phase it out, in my opinion, would be that.
Okay.
Also, mainly because, like, it hurt their own soldiers.
Yeah.
Like, from a military perspective, I think those things should always be your priority. Is, like, you know, if you want to go to war, you know, at least don't be, like, ISIS.
Low bar.
You know what I mean? Or the RSF.
Yeah.
That's
very
like
low,
kind of
very low bar.
Yeah.
Sure, bro. You gonna give me open
You know,
borders
but I
and a
also
great
don't want to
work
see.
for a luxury resource? Let's do
I don't
that.
want to see, like, you know, Russian guys getting unnecessarily executed and stuff.
Mm.
You know, and like cluster munitions found a place in the trenches, but it's going to be hell cleaning them up.
Yes. Yes, it will. It's going to be a long road back.
Cluster munitions, I was arguing for a long time there was no use for them.
Okay.
But it turns out in trench warfare they're pretty good.
Mm. Who'd have thought?
Armor munition, and that its use was directed at legitimate military targets. The absence of a specific prohibition meant DU remained legal by default, even if unpopular by reputation. The United Nations attempted to bridge the divide with non-binding resolutions, called for transparency, monitoring, and further study. These resolutions stopped short of condemnation, reflecting the reality that major military powers had no interest in restricting a weapon they still considered useful. Some countries, such as Belgium and Costa Rica,
What era score do you
enacted
need
domestic
for the modern
bans
era?
on DU weapons, framing the issue as one of humanitarian principle rather than legal obligation. These bans carried moral weight, but no binding authority beyond national borders. For governments that had used DU, the legal uncertainty offered protection. Acknowledging long-term harm would invite compensation claims, environmental remediation demands, and diplomatic fallout. Maintaining ambiguity allowed officials to emphasize battlefield necessity while deferring accountability. As long as DU remained legally permissible and scientifically inconclusive, it could be defended as a reasonable military choice. Veterans found themselves caught in the middle. Some sought recognition for health conditions they believed were linked to DU exposure. Others dismissed the controversy entirely, having experienced no noticeable effects. The lack of definitive answers left room for frustration on all sides. For those who believed they had been harmed, uncertainty felt like denial. For institutions tasked with evidence-based policy, uncertainty justified restraint. What emerged was not a clear verdict, but a stalemate. DU was neither vindicated nor condemned. It existed in a gray zone, sustained by conflicting studies, legal loopholes, and political incentives to avoid final answers. That gray zone allowed depleted uranium to remain in service long after its introduction, even as the nature of warfare and public tolerance for environmental risk continued to evolve. By the time attention shifted toward newer conflict and technologies, DU was already part of the landscape of modern war. The question was no longer whether it worked or whether it was controversial. The question became whether the world was willing to live indefinitely with a weapon that sat permanently between justification and regret. By the time the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan dominated the headlines, depleted uranium was no longer new, mysterious, or hidden behind classification. Everyone knew it existed, everyone knew it worked, and everyone knew it came with baggage. What changed was not DU itself, but the battlefield it was designed for. In Iraq after 2003, DU appeared again in armored engagements, particularly during the initial invasion. Abrams tanks fired the same family of DU penetrators that had proven themselves a decade earlier. The results were predictable. Iraqi armored vehicles stood little chance against modern fire control and uranium darts. But unlike Desert Storm, the fighting moved rapidly into cities. Destroyed vehicles were left in neighborhoods, industrial zones, and along major roadways. The debris did not sit isolated in the desert. It became part of places people lived. International teams later identified DU impact sites across Iraq, some of them still contaminated years later. Cleanup efforts were uneven and often incomplete, constrained by security issues, funding shortages, and political instability. Iraq inherited the long-term environmental cost of a weapon it did not choose to introduce. That reality hardened international criticism and reinforced the perception that DU imposed consequences far beyond the moment of combat. Afghanistan told a different story. There was little reason to use DU there. The Taliban did not field armored formations, and the targets that mattered were insurgents, compounds, and terrain rather than tanks. While allegations surfaced periodically, available evidence supports the conclusion that DU use in Afghanistan was minimal at most. That contrast highlighted an important truth. DU was never a general-purpose weapon. It existed to solve a specific problem. And when that problem disappeared, so did most of the justification for using it. Then came Syria. Between 2015 and 2017, the United States confirmed that A-10 aircraft fired DU rounds against ISIS vehicle convoys. The Pentagon initially denied the use, then acknowledged it once evidence surfaced. The justification was blunt. ISIS was operating hardened vehicles in open terrain, and DU provided the highest probability of a hard kill. Militarily, the decision made sense. Politically, it reopened a controversy many thought was fading away. At the same time, technology was moving on. Modern armor increasingly relied on layered composites, reactive tiles, and modular protection systems. Anti-tank warfare shifted toward top attack missiles, drones, and precision-guided munitions. In that environment, the classic tank-on-tank duel became rarer. Kinetic penetrators still mattered, but they no longer dominated planning the way they once had. Material science also closed the gap. Advanced tungsten alloys became approaching DU performance without the same environmental and political costs. Several NATO countries transitioned entirely away from DU, not because it failed, but because alternative became good enough. For the United States, the decision was more complicated. Existing stockpiles, sunk costs, and performance margins made immediate replacement unattractive. There was also the issue nobody liked to discuss openly. A full admission that DU posed significant long-term risks would trigger legal, financial, and diplomatic consequences that no government was eager to absorb. Veterans would demand expanded care, affected countries would seek remediation and compensation, entire procurement histories would come under scrutiny. Maintaining ambiguity became a form of damage control. Yet even that ambiguity has limits. Modern militaries operate under far more public scrutiny than their Cold War predecessors. Environmental impact, civilian harm, and long-term consequences now factor into weapons decisions in ways they never did before. DU increasingly looks like a solution from an earlier era, one that solved yesterday's problems while creating tomorrow's controversies. Still, depleted uranium has not disappeared. It remains in arsenals, in storage, and in doctrine, ready for a scenario that may or may not ever return. As long as heavy armor exists, and as long as no alternative completely eclipses the performance, DU will continue to occupy that uncomfortable space. It is not a superweapon, and it is not a war crime by definition. It is a reminder of how modern warfare works. Problems are solved quickly, efficiently, and with whatever tools are available. Consequences are managed later, if at all. Depleted uranium endures not because anyone loves it, but because it sits at the intersection of physics, economics, and reluctance to fully confront the cost of past decisions. In that sense, DU is not an anomaly. It is a case study. One dense metal rod that tells a much larger story about how wars are fought, how technologies linger,
We never
and how
have
the hardest
acted
problems
in
are
regard
often
for
the ones
less and
created
effective
after
tools of
the
war.
shooting
Yeah, no.
stops.
Because it's,
I'm Dave. I
the effect
appreciate
is
you
to
watching.
kill people.
Please subscribe, like, comment, and share. And until next time, stand tall.
That's what they look for. Did it kill them? Use it again.
However beautiful the strategy.
Housing crisis. I could buy some,
Across fiction, there are various gods that serve different roles, enacting their will from above, below, or someplace entirely different. But every so often, there comes a story with a god that just feels different, as something that reflects human darkness in the worst ways, threatens to erase the very things that make us human, or propose a concept so foreign to us that just the thought of it is terrifying. Hello everyone, welcome to another video where I will be talking about some scary depictions of gods from media that I discovered recently, as well as recommendations from my last video on this topic. You can expect spoilers on everything I talk about, and let's get started. I absolutely love Twin Peaks, and there is truly no other TV show quite like it. I've mentioned it once before under the sphere of cosmic horror, but in this universe there are some very interesting godlike entities. The good fireman and the evil Judy. Judy is a very ancient being that is the source or mother of all evil. Physically, she looks like a nude, gray, demonic humanoid floating through space or jittering on one occasion inside of a cage built to contain her. She also sometimes appears as a white horse, which means her first appearance was in the original seasons. And the horse form is so random and out of nowhere that it's kind of unsettling. This is her symbol, a blob with two horns, and something about it I always found kind of creepy. It's such a simple shape, but the weight it carries makes it hit hard. Judy is able to possess humans, and she does exactly that with Sarah Palmer, a woman that goes through a lot in the series, and as a result, she's always reiterating her despair and trauma, which is the perfect fuel for Judy. But Judy also possessed her early on, so maybe Judy is the cause of all that sorrow within her. In episode 8 of The Return, we see an atomic bomb test that allows Judy to bleed into our reality and unleash evil forces such as Bob and the Woodsman, which are like extensions of her evil. I think it's cool that this evil came into our world from the atomic bomb, because that's when humanity took an unprecedented step towards evil. So it's very fitting. It's like humanity finally reached the point where entities such as Judy are ready to come feast on the darkness of our world. What's interesting is that the first mention of Judy was in 1992's Fire Walk With Me, where Philip Jeffries runs into the FBI office and mentions her, terrified.
In fact, we're not going to talk about Judy at all.
I always found that scene to be very chilling. In the hierarchy of evil in Twin Peaks, right under Judy there is Bob, who is the main antagonist of the original seasons. And Bob is like a parasitic force that feeds on human suffering, possessing people and pushing them towards violence, so he can consume the result of that. In the original series, he comes from the Black Lodge, a place that exists outside normal reality.
He might ask me for a joint war.
No, you can propose one with him though, if you want to.
There's my military strength. What was that, 314? His is 449. Oh, Rome is stronger than me. Pound maker.
Yeah, but the Kree also have military.
I also have a general sitting here that can reduce my war weariness too.
Plus, you don't want to take his cities. You want to hit his tiles to slow him down.
That's basically what I'm going to do. I'm just going to send in raiders.
Yeah, light cavalry and shit. Like, for, like, districts, you can loot that district for the amount of buildings that are in it. So if he has fully developed districts, you can hit that district 4 times often and get the same boost every turn. And it'll be like a 200 boost. So it's like an extra turn of science or culture.
And operates on its own supernatural logic. He doesn't really have a physical form of his own, so he manifests through a human host, most famously Leland Palmer, and uses that body to inflict chaos on the world, unfortunately including his own daughter. He's an extension of Judy in this world, where human suffering is just another kind of energy, harvested and traded by beings whose motives we can barely understand. Leland's wife Sarah being possessed by Judy could explain why she never acted on Leland's wrongdoings too. There are also the Woodsmen, which are very creepy, and their job is basically to clean up after supernatural events caused by other evil forces like Bob. In episode 8, they take over a radio station and transmit a broadcast that kind of entrances those who hear it. This allows a strange frog with wings to hatch and enter a young girl's mouth, who I believe is Sarah Palmer. So that would mean that this is the moment she got possessed by Judy. Their base is also very cool. It's a rundown convenience store / gas station that has its own rules and logic. Then there is the fireman, which is the opposite of Judy, a benevolent being. He lives in a realm that looks like a theater or an old monochrome dream, a space completely outside of time where everything moves slowly. The way he communicates is also strange. Visions and cryptic messages that he sends into the world like warnings. Maybe because if he directly interfered with the world, it would mess some things up, and then his effect would be more alike to Judy's. He creates small pieces of hope and sends them into the world, almost like counterweights to the darkness. Right after the atomic blast opens the door for Judy's influence, the fireman creates Laura Palmer's golden orb and sends her down to Earth as a response to the evil. The fireman is much more chill than Judy, and probably not as powerful.
I don't know
because evil is stronger than good. His whole presence is very calm, in contrast to Judy and her meddling with nature.
I don't really care about Twin Peaks.
It's a video about gods, depiction of gods.
Yeah, but it sounds like it's about Twin Peaks to me.
Well, it's just Twin Peaks is this
lot of yapping.
First part.
Nature directly. Judy forces herself into people, and the fireman only appears when someone is ready to receive a message, even though that message is usually very cryptic. It's like he's trying to do the minimal amount of interference he can, but still trying his best to fix things. The story of Twin Peaks is basically good versus evil at its core, but I think this might be one of the best representations of that, because Judy's evil is just so absolute and results in horrible acts that we see on screen, which feel personal and relatable. One thing I noticed is that in the original seasons, while there were a lot of bad things happening, the world still looked brighter and the good sides of people rose to the top. But in the return, everything is darker, and we get to see a lot more of the evil happening, even though those scenes may not seem connected to any plot, just to illustrate how the world is becoming incrementally more evil over time, all starting from the moment of that atomic bomb test. In my last video on this topic, I mentioned Berserk, where I talked about the God Hand and their powers, abilities, and their cosmic significance in this universe. But there is another entity in Berserk that exists even above them, the idea of evil. The most information we get about this thing actually comes from a removed chapter of the manga, Chapter 83, God of the Abyss Part 2. It was removed because Miura felt that it revealed too many answers to the story. When Griffith activates the Bayolet during the eclipse,
this is a little too like required knowledge
into a place
for me,
described.
bro.
Fair enough. I have another one.
We buried them in stone.
It's pagans. It sounds like Sean Bean. Are we watching Civ?
We burned their temples, shattered their idols, rewrote their names into monsters and devils. We crowned new gods.
Is this Sean
calling
Bean?
The old ones forgotten. But they were never gone. Their names still echo in forgotten forests. Their rites still linger in our holidays, our stories, our blood. And now, after centuries in the dark, they are stirring. Not in temples, but in festivals, online rituals, and quiet prayers to the earth and sky. The old gods are rising again. This is Pantheon mythology, and this is the return of paganism. If you too want to rise again, check out Pantheon Apparel, our clothing brand inspired by myths, folklore, and legends. We ship worldwide and are rated excellent on Trustpilot. Link in the description.
Don't tell me what to do. Ooh. Thank you, thank you.
The word pagan comes from the Latin paganus, meaning country dweller, outsider, or villager. Early Christians used it as a label for those who clung to the old ways, those outside the cities where the new faith was spreading. Over time, it became a weaponized term, grouping countless belief systems under a single word that implied ignorance, superstition, and defeat. But the beliefs it referred to were anything but simple. Across the world, people honored gods, ancestors, spirits, and the natural world. In Scandinavia, they called on Odin and Freya. In West Africa, they turned to the Orishas for guidance. The Slavs made offerings to the forest spirits and household guardians. The Greeks and Romans worshipped a vast pantheon of deities who governed every part of life. In pre-Islamic Arabia, tribes prayed to sky gods and desert spirits under an open sky. Paganism shaped a worldview rooted in cycles and connection. Time was seen as circular, marked by seasons and celestial rhythms. The earth was sacred, and so were the trees, rivers, and animals. Rituals honored the forces that sustained life, celebrated birth, mourned death, and sought harmony with the unseen. These beliefs were not bound by scripture, but by land, memory, and
Rome's
tradition.
getting a great merchant I would love to have.
The fall of paganism began with the rise of empire-backed faith. When Emperor Constantine aligned himself with Christianity in the 4th century, the old gods lost their political shield. What followed under Theodosius was a systematic campaign. Pagan rites were banned, sacred spaces condemned, and the old ways cast into shadow. Temples that had stood for centuries were sealed and destroyed. In Alexandria, the great Serapeum was reduced to rubble.
And the Maoris.
Statues of gods were dragged through the streets, altars were desecrated, libraries burned. These were not isolated acts of vandalism. They were coordinated efforts to erase a worldview from public life. But conquest through fire was only part of the strategy. Many of the festivals were preserved in name, but their meaning was rewritten. Midwinter rites honoring the rebirth of the sun became Christmas. Spring celebrations of renewal and fertility were transformed into Easter. The symbols remained evergreen trees, eggs, hares, but they served a new theology. The gods themselves were redefined. Pan, once a spirit of music and wild places, took on the features of the Christian devil. The horned god, once a symbol of balance and the cycle of life, became a figure of fear. The goddess, honored for her power to give life and heal, was branded a witch. Her name became a whisper and used in trials and executions. As the church expanded its influence, it claimed control over education, writing, and law. Oral traditions were dismissed as superstition. Local beliefs were forbidden or absorbed into saint cults. What once lived in ritual, in memory, in community, was confined to silence. Paganism wasn't defeated in battle. It was dismantled,
Referring to him as saint
censored,
cults is
and buried
interesting,
beneath
but
the
it is
weight
100%
of empire
correct.
and scripture.
Because the
The
historical
gods may
term
have been cast out of the
cult
temples,
is much different than
but
the
they
modern
remained
term
in the corners
cult.
of everyday
Interesting.
life. In quiet places,
That's why, like, when
far
I
away from
founded
the
my
reach of
religion in
bishops
that
and
Civ
kings,
game, it
their
was the
echoes
cult
lived
of the
on.
Supreme Bunghole.
They survived in the rustling woods, the warmth
So, like,
of
normally the
hearth fires,
cults...
in the stories told.
So, normally, in the polytheistic religions...
Yeah.
You would have cults to specific gods. And that would mainly be, like, the priestesses and stuff around it.
Mm-hmm.
And... like, I don't think they refer to them, like, when you get to the Hellenistic Greek period, I don't think you refer to them as cults anymore then.
Okay.
But saying that they became saint cults is so interesting because that's normally what would happen is people, like, the religion isn't necessarily, like, Egypt is a great example. Like, it wasn't like everyone in Egypt believed the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, depending on the region, you had different focuses on different things. So, and then also you may have people who didn't worship the same gods as the Egyptians, like, you know, Jews, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So, the monotheists, they just believed that these other religions and gods also existed.
Right.
So, they formed around specific gods that gave them what they believed is something that they would need.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what's interesting with the saints is because you have the saints and they'll be like saints of specific things.
Yes.
Like, this one's good at helping you find things. This is the saint of this and
Isn't
the
that
saint
Catholicism?
of that. Huh?
Isn't that mostly Catholicism?
Saints are Catholic.
Okay.
So remember that Orthodoxy and Catholicism, they both have saints, right? And they came a lot before Protestantism.
Okay.
So these would be organized churches who are taking control and then, like, taking, because, like, this is what Christians did, and it actually started, like, with the Romans. So Roman gods are interesting because there's actually cases where there's a god and they actually get 3 copies of the god.
Okay.
Because they don't realize the person that they conquer is already worshiping the god that they call a different thing.
Oh, interesting.
And so they just write it as a new god that's like an associate of Hades or something like that. But then, like, later you go back and you can learn that it was, like, kind of the same thing. So they would do that basically is, like, when they conquered them, they would say, oh, no, your gods still exist. We just call them this. That was, like, a Rome thing.
Is that where cult comes from?
Yes. So that's what they would use cult for. Is the Romans probably wouldn't use cult for themselves.
Yeah.
But would do it for others. So to say, like, a saint cult, you're like, just basically doing what monotheists did with saints. Resource discovered.
After dark,
Oil.
fairies,
Oil.
elves, and household spirits replaced the old gods in name, but their habits were familiar. Offerings were left at thresholds,
MC,
I'm building a
protected
wander
charms
on
hung
top of
above
oil.
doorways.
Yes, Cal, you're
Festivals
100%
marked
correct.
solstices and equinoxes, often under Christian names,
How do I cancel?
but with customs rooted in something far older.
There's a button for it.
People
You cancel the
danced
movement.
around maypoles. Fires
I
were
want to
still
cancel
lit on
building the
midsummer
wander
nights.
on this
The
tile.
rituals
I
were
don't
never
think you
entirely
can,
forgotten.
because
They simply changed their mask.
I wanted to build the Golden Gate Bridge. I think someone else built it before me, but you can. I tried to unselect it and move it elsewhere, and it didn't work. Because if I could have built the Golden Gate Bridge,
I just
can you
gotta
see
stop going for it, you know?
Can you
Someone
see
else
my
can
territory?
get that wander, and then I can get oil on there.
Can you see my territory? Like all of
yeah.
it? Okay.
Not
see,
all of it. I don't. Hang on.
Okay, so right where you see there, right? There's a. I'm just gonna screen share my screen. Give me a second.
Yeah, go for it.
So like, I wanted to bridge this gap here with the Golden Gate Bridge, which would have connected and avoided me having to go around here, which could also probably get trade routes going to these cities much quicker. But I built it here, and then somebody else built it before me, I guess. Lame.
Those who kept the traditions alive did so without altars or scriptures. They were midwives, herbalists, charmers, and cunning folk. Their knowledge passed from mother to daughter, from neighbor to neighbor. They healed with plants, whispered blessings over newborns, and read signs in smoke and storm. The church called it superstition, then dangerous. But to those who lived by the land, it was simply what had always been done. Even the saints bore traces of the old gods. Bridget of Kildare shared her name, her fire, and her healing power with a goddess once worshipped across Ireland. St. Nicholas travelled through the sky in midwinter, knew who had been good or wicked, and offered gifts in return. These figures were Christian in name, but carried the shape and spirit of those who came before. Paganism never vanished. It adapted, scattered and whispered. It lived in the cracks of official religion, hidden in customs, stories, and the turning of the year. Though the gods had been buried, their memory moved quietly through the generations.
What are you doing?
Waiting.
Talking to me?
No. Fucking Rome.
The silence didn't last forever. By the 19th century, something began to stir beneath the surface of modern Europe. As factories rose and forests fell, as hunger grew for stories older than steel, the Romantic movement began to turn its gaze to the past. The ruined temples, half-remembered gods, and the mist-wrapped myths of an earlier age. Poets, painters, and folklorists sought meaning in the legends once dismissed as superstition. The past no longer looked primitive, it looked sacred. This fascination was more than artistic. In Britain, groups began reviving druidic traditions, gathering at ancient sites like Stonehenge to honour seasonal change and ancestral memory. Gerald Gardner laid the foundations of Wicca, blending ceremonial magic, folk practice, and goddess worship into something both new and deeply rooted. Aleister Crowley drew on Egyptian and Hermetic sources to shape Thelema, a system of will and ritual that echoed ancient rites. Elsewhere, Reconstructionist movements took shape. Hellenic revivalists in Greece, heathens in Scandinavia and North America, Slavic Rodnovers in Eastern Europe, each reaching back to restore what history had scattered. By the late 20th century, paganism had stepped back into the light. In many countries, it gained legal recognition. Public rituals returned, fires were lit again on solstice nights, this time with permission. Circles gathered in woodlands, mountains, and city parks to mark the turning of the year. The gods were no longer confined to memory. They were being named again, honored again, in ways both ancient and adapted. These revivals were rarely exact replicas of the past, but in the rituals, in the chants, in the slow movement of feet on sacred ground, something returned. A sense of presence, a call once silenced, now answered. The revival that once gathered in groves and festivals has found new ground, in screens, forums, and hashtags. The digital age has become a fertile landscape for the old gods to rise once more, not through temples or priesthoods, but through memes, live streams, and shared rituals scattered across the world. Online covens now span continents. TikTok witches blend tradition and trend in short bursts of spellwork and symbolism. On Reddit, mythology communities dissect ancient texts and reconstruct forgotten rites. Instagram grids become digital altars filled with candles, runes, and offerings laid out in bedrooms and kitchen corners. For many, this is the new sacred space, private, portable, and deeply personal. Among the rising figures are gods both ancient and reimagined. Dionysus, Hecate, and Cernunnos appear in posts, equal parts reverent and ironic. Worship shifts between humour and sincerity, but the presence remains. These are not idols restored by scholars. They are gods chosen by feeling, symbols of chaos, freedom, transformation and desire, reborn into a world they once ruled in myth. Ancient texts, once kept behind locked cases or academic paywalls, are now just a click away. Grimoires, hymns, rituals, all searchable, shareable, and remixable. The gatekeepers are gone. No priest is needed, no temple must be built. In this new era, everyone becomes their own guide, their own interpreter, their own priest. What emerges is a spiritual awakening without institutions, a movement shaped not by hierarchy, but by connection. Connection to the earth, to history, to myth, and to one another. The gods are speaking again, and this time they're finding their voice in places no one could have predicted. But why now? Why, after centuries of silence, are the gods being named again? Why are rituals returning, myths resurfacing, and ancient symbols woven back into daily life? In a world that feels increasingly rootless, the gods offer something ancient. As organized religion loses its hold and institutions crumble, many are left searching for something beyond doctrine or dogma. What rises in its place is something older.
Hey, would we?
A return to ritual.
Would we fall into this? Considering our symbol is based on god shit? Would we fall into this category of bringing it back? We're bringing it back. Fire. Ah, there's no production. So who built the Golden Gate Bridge? Someone, it's not telling me. I don't know why. Accept my friendship.
Did you accept my thing?
I can't say anything from you.
It's not, you gotta look on the side.
I see it now. It's not let me do it.
Work. Did you already press that third?
That's right. Where can I put a national park? Civ 6.
It's got to be unworked tiles.
4 tiles.
Yeah, 4 unworked tiles. You can remove improvements.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that case, Old Mate can stay. And I'll put the national park right on this peninsula. Because I don't need citrus. Interesting. Is this kind of about to fucking wage war on me? Look at where he's positioning.
You never know. If it looks like it's, start making military units.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
You know, where national parks are really good,
Mm-hmm.
where I'm going to build one is over here. So I just found the Dead Sea here.
Okay.
So I'm going to build national parks around the Dead Sea.
Mm-hmm.
With neighborhoods next
Okay.
to those national parks. And this will allow me to have a huge population focused on this island, which will be my main colony to assault Rome. Is
Yeah,
this
okay.
island right here. Well, the 2 islands. So this does 2 tile natural wonder. It appears as lake and provides 2 culture plus 2 gold and plus 1 production. Does not provide fresh water. And then its appeal is breathtaking. Which means if a neighborhood is next to it, it gets plus 5.
Yes. Okay, what do I need here? Housing, probably food. Let's move production to food. Get more food there. Buenos Aires. And take from production to food as well. Hopefully that can start growing. Great. Excellent.
Conscript the tourist. Can you do that?
Not sure. I will protect the Kree if Rome wages war on him. I will jump in.
You should actually try to let him take one of the Kree cities, and then we can declare a military emergency.
Ah, that's a good idea.
Even letting him take one of your cities for a military emergency is kind of a good idea.
Well, he's not going to be able to
I'm
take
not sure
Buenos
if you
Aires.
can call them, though.
No, he's not going to be able to take Buenos Aires, that's the thing. I will fuck his shit up. I can produce an army in 10 turns. my Kyoto production is insane. I can produce cores in 2 turns.
Declaration of war. Poundmaker in Norway just went to war with Rome.
Ah. Neat. artillery.
Oh, finally, our economic alliance ended. I can give the economic alliance to who I need it with.
Amazing.
No, I can't. Bro, why would you do this? Why would you do an economic alliance with somebody else? You doofus. I'll look who gives me the most gold and then do the alliance.
Yeah. Hmm. Damn, all my cities can produce units very quickly.
Yep.
Whatever I'm doing, I'm doing the correct thing.
Did you go for the high population like I was telling you?
Yeah, it looks like all my my cities are over 10.
Yeah, see?
Crazy.
So farms are better than mines in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Even my city that was struggling is now no longer struggling because I built, I explicitly made sure to build, farms and clear rainforest to build production.
Yeah. And then also you can do trade to your own cities for food.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been doing. All my trade routes are domestic. Ooh, I can make 7 now. I'm going to make more traders. If we go into an alliance, I'll send 2 traders to you.
I'm going to let my alliances expire and then weigh my options.
Okay. We won't do one yet, then.
Why is this tile orange? That's weird.
Ooh, only first round of climate change in the modern era. That's pretty good. We've done well.
I checked like a turn ago and there wasn't climate change yet, so. Bro, who is this? Portugal settler. Where are you going, pal? I still have that worthless musician.
Ooh, I need housing. Okay. So Norway went to war as well?
Yeah.
A good plan violently.
Grievances. One of your friends. Oh, I have grievances on Norway because Rome is my friend, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't know why Portugal came down here instead of going left.
Don't know.
With his settler. I don't know if there's any place for you here. Like, I would like him to do it because that city will fall in loyalty to me. I have so much Diplo favor. I'm so behind with my era score though.
I have no uranium on my anywhere.
Still got that worthless musician.
Well, I'm probably going to go into a dark age, so that's neat. Don't know how, but sure. 7 turns, there's no fucking way. No fucking way I'm getting 20 era score.
Yeah, that one came out so fast. Oh, I'm friends with Rome. So I guess we go to Coupe, right? fucking barbarians got modern infantry.
What the fuck?
Jeans. Oh, you're gonna get jeans, it looks like.
Who?
Hit play on the video. You're gonna get a great engineer who's gonna give you
Okay.
jeans. It's a unique luxury resource.
Okay.
To Earth, to story. The climate crisis has deepened this search. As forests burn and oceans rise, people feel the disconnect more sharply. Modern life has stripped nature of its sacredness,
Yeah, they
turned the soil
basically
into
are,
a resource and the
because
sky into a
free
ceiling.
cities aren't they
But
barbarian
paganism
units?
speaks of a
Potentially, I can't remember.
That's what's cool about the barbarian mode, where they can become city-states.
Uh-huh. Pick siphon funds.
I'm saving all my favor for this. What do I need to commit? If I commit 300 here.
To which? Diplo points? Like Diplo victory?
Yeah, to give me... Yeah. I'm putting 300 because I have enough saved up for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say production units cheaper. I'm going to put a little weight behind it too. Oh, they all spent all their Diplo points. Every single one.
Really? That's hilarious.
Yeah, they all went to basically 0.
Amazing. I still have 450.
Damn. Norway put 13 into production.
Wow. They really want their
So-
military units.
Yeah. Rome put 6.
Mm. Oh, neat.
Where was that other oil? I know I had another oil. 1, 2. Where was it? It's over here? No. Oil. Was it under something? By the way, if you press map search, you can just click strategic resource. There's oil right there. And it will highlight where every strategic resource is in your territory.
How do I do that?
But it's on top of your map. It actually highlights every strategic resource on the map. Okay, I'm gonna do something crazy.
There's uranium. And it's in Roman territory, great. There's one that isn't in Roman territory. There's one in fucking the Cree territory, another one in Roman territory.
Gross.
Can't help it.
A living world, where rivers are spirits and trees hold memory. In its return, there's a plea to honor what has been neglected, to see the world as alive again. This renewal is also a response to the legacy of conquest. For centuries, indigenous and ancestral beliefs were dismissed as savage or superstitious. Now, people are beginning to reclaim what was taken. The gods of their ancestors, once demonized, colonized, or erased, are being remembered with new reverence. It's not nostalgia. It's repair. And all around us, the modern world is in flux. Political systems fracture, certainty vanishes, culture shifts faster than it can be understood. In the chaos, people reach for something stable, something timeless. The old gods offer roots in a world that feels unmoored. They don't promise salvation, they offer presence. They don't demand belief, they invite recognition. But even revival casts a shadow. As paganism re-emerges, it does so along fractured lines. Some seek historical accuracy, reconstructing rites, languages, and rituals from archaeology and surviving texts. Others take a more intuitive path, blending traditions, symbols, and beliefs into something personal or fluid. These differences spark tension. What counts as authentic? Who decides what's real? Beneath the surface, darker currents have begun to stir. In some corners of the revival, pagan symbols have been seized by nationalist groups. Thor's hammer, once a sacred emblem, has been used to signal exclusion. Slavic runes and ancestral rites are co-opted by those seeking ethnic purity rather than spiritual connection. These appropriations twist ancient beliefs into weapons, creating a distorted mirror of the very oppression paganism once resisted. Paganism's return is not free from complexity. The gods may be rising, but so are the questions, and the answers, like the gods themselves, refuse to be simple. The gods are no longer hidden. Across the world, paganism is no longer a whisper. It is spoken aloud in weddings held beneath oak trees, in naming rites that call upon ancestors and elemental spirits, in rituals that honor the moon, the harvest, the dead. Temples are being rebuilt, not to recreate the past, but to give it space in the present. In courts and census records, the shift is visible. In some countries, paganism is now recognized as a legal faith. Thousands identify with the old ways, and as the number grows with each generation, what was once forgotten is now protected. What was buried is now counted. This is more than revival, it is resurrection. The gods do not return unchanged, they adapt, they shift, reappear in forms suited to the world we now live in. They are honored not just through sacrifice and scripture, but through art, community ritual and resistance. They move through festivals, through code, through ink on skin and stone. We no longer need to imagine the gods walking again. We see their footprints already. The fires that burn on solstice nights, the chants rising over city skylines, in the silence that settles when offerings are laid down beneath trees older than memory. They're back. And this time, they're not waiting to be believed, only remembered. The gods we buried are rising again, not in thunder or flame, but in silence, memory and need. We thought they were gone, but they were only waiting for us to realize what we lost.
Goofy. Time to get robbed, dingus.
Look, a video about trees.
What you're looking at is the most endangered wild tree on the planet. This species dates back over 200 million years. It endured ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, and the breakup of the continents. But today, it has become unimaginably vulnerable. This
I told
is
you
the
the
Wallamai
Portuguese
pine.
man would be angry at me
Scientists
because I don't have
believed it went
ships.
extinct 2 million years ago. But that all changed in 1994, when a park ranger stumbled across a secret grove hidden in a remote canyon. Right now, just 89 of these trees remain hidden in the wild, and trying to find them can land you a $300,000 fine and a 2-year prison sentence. But that's just the tip of the Wallamai pine's extraordinary conservation strategy. What you're about to discover is the unprecedented mission to save this small group of trees. It's a story of blindfolded scientists, covert firefighting operations, and a radical plan that successfully disrupted the global black market. It's September 10th, 1994. David Noble, a national parks officer, was spending his weekend doing what he loved most, exploring uncharted canyons in the Blue Mountains wilderness northwest of Sydney. Deep in the Wallamai National Park, Noble and his 2 companions were searching for new rock climbing routes when something caught his eye. In a secluded sandstone gorge, surrounded by tree ferns and trickling water, stood a cluster of trees unlike anything he'd seen before. These weren't your typical Australian eucalyptus or rainforest species. They had...
You know what's cool about this tree? They reckon it's one of the oldest living trees to date. Like it's, because it's a pine tree, so it's a, I believe that they spread through spores, not pollination. So it's like an ancient tree that hasn't changed for millions of years, and there's only a few left. And
Jurassic Park-ass tree.
Literally fucking hidden in the middle of the Blue Mountains somewhere. Nobody knows where they are. Except for obviously the conservationists.
Straight trunks.
And there's a disease or like a bug that gets into these trees and fucking annihilates them. Also fires. They dedicate so much effort to protecting these trees that they will pretty much dedicate multiple fire teams to protecting the area. It's crazy.
Reaching towards slivers of sunlight. But what really grabbed his attention was their bark. Dark brown and heavily textured, looking almost like bubbling chocolate frozen in time. Noble knew plants. As a parks officer, he'd seen thousands of native species across New South Wales.
You got a drought.
But these trees were completely unfamiliar. Their foliage had an almost fern-like appearance.
If winning isn't
Intrigued, he carefully collected a small sample and tucked it into his pack. Back at park headquarters, Noble showed his samples to colleagues. Nobody could identify them. The specimens eventually made their way to botanists at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney, which is when they realized they were looking at something extraordinary. This wasn't just a new species, it was an entirely new genus, one that existed only in the fossil record. The tree Noble found belonged to the Araucariaceae family, ancient conifers that dominated forests when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Based on fossil evidence, scientists believe these particular trees had vanished from the planet around 2 million years ago. When the discovery was announced in December 1994, it made headlines worldwide. Carrick Chambers, director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, famously described it as the equivalent of finding a dinosaur alive on Earth. The media dubbed it the dinosaur tree and the greatest botanical discovery of the 20th century. But even as the world celebrated, Australian authorities faced an immediate dilemma. How do you protect a biological miracle that everyone suddenly wants to see? Within months of the announcement, officials made a decision that was unprecedented in plant conservation. They would keep the exact location absolutely secret. The coordinates became classified information, known only to a handful of researchers and park managers. But this wasn't just bureaucratic caution. Early interactions with the site had already shown how fragile the situation was. In 1995, during one of the first scientific expeditions, a helicopter's rotor blades accidentally struck and damaged part of a Wollemi pine's crown. If trained scientists with the best intentions could harm these trees, what might happen if the location became public knowledge? In late 2005, researchers conducting a routine health check made a chilling discovery. Some of the younger trees were showing signs of decline, yellowing leaves, thinning canopies, and weakened root systems. Lab tests confirmed their worst fears. Phytophthora cinnamomi had infiltrated the grove. Phytophthora cinnamomi isn't technically a fungus, it's a water mold, a microscopic organism that produces swimming spores capable of devastating plant communities. In Australia, it's known as the biological bulldozer because of how efficiently it can wipe out native vegetation. The pathogen attacks root systems, essentially starving trees to death by cutting off their ability to absorb water and nutrients. But what made this discovery unsettling was that the pathogen wasn't native to that pristine canyon ecosystem. Someone had carried it in from the outside world. And although it might not sound like a big deal, it became a death sentence for these endangered trees. You see, all the Wollemi pines in that canyon are essentially clones of each other. Genetic analysis revealed that sometime between 10,000 and 26,000 years ago, the species went through such a severe population bottleneck that virtually all genetic diversity was lost. Every tree in the grove shares nearly identical DNA, descendants of perhaps just 1 or 2 individuals that survived the last ice age. This genetic uniformity means they have no natural defenses against new diseases. If Phytophthora could kill...
Isn't it crazy that trees are literally the same as people? Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. If you reduce your numbers down to a fuck all, you have no genetic diversity and you are vulnerable to disease and famine and whatever. Like,
yeah, that's why America doesn't
have
the gross Michael.
One Wallamai pine. It could kill them all. The contamination incident validated every extreme security measure the authorities had implemented. It proved that even well-meaning visitors could accidentally doom an entire species. From that moment forward, the protocols became even more stringent. Today, the handful of people authorized to visit the site must scrub their boots and equipment with methylated spirits before entering the canyon. Some researchers have even reported being blindfolded.
I'm not sure whether this is a root fungus or like a root mold, or it's purely just like a above ground mold. But it's pretty devastating from what I understand.
During helicopter transport to prevent them from memorizing landmarks that could compromise the
John.
Yes, Daddy.
Climate change opened up my trade route above my area here because it melted the ice. I was blocked. I got rid of an admiral because I couldn't move him around from the fucking harbor here, and now I can.
Oh, you can't jump them from cities if they're admirals?
I was on a harbor that was about 3 tiles from the city. Do you want to do a trade alliance so I can send shit to you? Do an economic alliance. I sent you a thing.
Let me see. Let me look at my traders to see how long until their route's complete.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to do that? I don't know. I once my trader comes up. And I can see that screen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, look at this guy.
One by one, they were all
Hey, trader's looking.
I can't. I'm saying that I need to wait until I have a trade route open. I don't know when my next trade route. Oh wait. Does it say here? Is it right here? Trade route? No, that's just deals. Speaking of which.
What do I need in this city? Amenities.
Hey, I heard you're going to war. Here you go. You'll need these, huh? Any deal? What are you going to give me? A great work? Absolutely. You can have gunpowder for a great work.
Huh.
Absolutely, sir.
Norway just gave me all his gold.
Yeah, he gave me all his gold and a great work.
It's pretty good.
Oh my god, I'm 2 points away from getting out of a dark age.
Wait, really?
Yes, I've been fucking clawing my way out.
Oh yeah, I'm so fucked. I have 15 that I have to get until...
I took out a loan and bought a settler just to hopefully get a settler down sooner to try to get era score from that. Yeah,
I'm gonna make a battleship just because I want one. I want a Yamamoto because I'm not building ships
we're
right
already
now.
in level 2 climate change.
Yes, it moved quite quickly. Okay. Where am I? Okay, we're getting a neighborhood here. Need amenities next. Purchase. Production. Let's do entertainment complex. Because that's a cheat code for amenities. Yeah, Rome moved his shit the fuck away from me, so I could literally.
Well, yeah, he just got
join the
attacked
war.
by 2 different people.
So I could literally join the war and just go sack his shit.
Well, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna wait for their war to settle and then attack Rome.
That's a good idea. I'm gonna sack his shit in the meantime. I'm gonna use my alliance with the Kree to join that war. Although he sent me a message, so maybe he wants me to join. Maybe he wants a joint war. Maybe he wants a hand. See, I built 4 units so far, and I got
Rome is so fucked.
200. Hey, a trade route. Let's see. Military engineer. Come back here. I'm gonna build a tunnel through. Wait, can I build a tunnel? Adjacent mountain tunnel. Nice. Hell yeah. Now I should be able to trade. Fuck. I got my light cavalry. I'm gonna wait till I get my next one, and then I'm gonna go use 2 of them to sack his shit.
Hey, worthless musician, how you doing?
Hell yeah.
Worthless trader, how you doing?
just stacking cash, baby. I have a message. You have great respect for those who declare their friendship to the world. You are correct, sir. You are my best friend. You're the first one I met. How can you let those barbarians run amok so close to your home? What are you talking about, silly Norwegian man? There are no barbarians. The only barbarians that I see are the Romans.
Maybe that's what they meant.
Good deal, sir. I will take the work that gives me more culture and tourism, yes. The ode to joy? I will definitely take that, thank you.
My laptop's not plugged in.
How you doing, my Cree friend? 394. Where is Rome? 590. Wow, Rome is strong. I might actually need to step in here. Like, together, Norway is fine with the Cree, but I don't think Norway is anywhere close. Hmm.
I want to learn more about the tree. Tell me about the tree.
Sorry.
Location. And the legal framework backing up these measures is equally severe. In 2005, the New South Wales government declared the Wollemi Pines Canyon a critical habitat under state conservation law. But these extreme measures create a profound paradox at the heart of modern conservation. Here's a species that captures the imagination of people worldwide, a living link to the age of dinosaurs, a miracle of survival against impossible odds. Yet the very fascination it inspires becomes its greatest threat. Every person who wants to see these ancient trees in their natural habitat represents a potential vector for the diseases that could destroy them. As Dr. Baron McKenzie from the National Parks and Wildlife Service puts it, people think they can visit safely without having an impact, and it's just not the case. It just takes 1 gram of infected soil, and that's it. There's currently no cure. But as conservationists soon realized, merely hiding the tree was creating a dangerous black market incentive. So to truly save the Wollemi pine, they had to embrace the very human desire they were fighting. It became one of the greatest plays in the history of conservation strategy. Instead of restricting access to Wollemi pine specimens, the Australian government decided that they would instead flood the global market with them. If anyone could legally buy a Wollemi pine, why would collectors risk massive fines and prison time to steal one from the wild? In October 2005, Sotheby's Australia held what they called the Botanical Sale of the Century. 292 young Wollemi pine saplings, all propagated from cuttings taken from the wild trees, went under the hammer in Sydney. Bidders from around the world competed for the chance to own a piece of living prehistory, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The auction raised over 1.15 million Australian dollars, with individual lots selling for thousands. One collection of just 15 saplings fetched $149,000. The average price per plant was nearly $4,000, 3 times more than their projected sale price. But this wasn't just about the money. Every dollar from those sales went directly back into Wollemi pine conservation efforts, meaning the trees were literally paying for their own protection. By 2006, Wollemi pines were available in garden centers across Australia, the UK, and the United States. The price of around $50 to $100 per plant put them within reach of ordinary gardeners, not just wealthy collectors. What had been the world's rarest tree the year prior was suddenly growing in backyards from Sydney to Seattle. But this mass cultivation program also created another unexpected bonus: the world's largest citizen science project for an endangered species. Thousands of home gardeners became accidental researchers, testing how Wollemi pines grew in different climates and soil conditions. In 2023, scientists published results from a survey of over 1,500 growers across 31 countries.
The data revealed that these ancient trees were surprisingly adaptable. They thrived in temperate climates with adequate rainfall, tolerated both heat and cold better than expected, and grew well in various soil types. One grower in France reported their Wollemi pine reaching over 8 meters tall in just 14 years. Gardens in Scotland found the trees could survive temperatures as low as -12 degrees Celsius.
Damn.
And this information proved invaluable for conservation planning. Scientists now knew exactly what conditions the species needed to establish backup populations in the wild. The citizen science data directly informed decisions about where to plant translocation sites, secret locations where young Wollemi pines could grow, as insurance against catastrophe at the original grove. But perhaps the most sophisticated breakthrough of the conservation project emerged in 2024, the Global Meta Collection Project. Advanced genetic sequencing had revealed something remarkable. Despite appearing genetically identical, the wild Wollemi pines actually contain 6 distinct genetic strains, subtle variations that had previously been undetectable. Scientists propagated representatives of each strain and distributed 174 young trees to 28 botanical gardens across the UK and Europe.
I did it! I did it! I got out of the dark age!
Tens of thousands of these ancient trees were thriving in gardens worldwide.
I did it!
While the precious wild grove remained safely hidden and protected. But by the end of the year, Australia's climate delivered a terrifying reminder that some threats can't be managed as
Fire,
easily.
baby. Fire.
The summer of 2019-2020 became known as the Black Summer,
building a
the
Christ
most
the
catastrophic fire season in the country's
I'll
recorded
use
history.
the production it generates
Across
later
New South Wales,
when I
massive
don't
blazes
get that
consumed
wonder,
over
'cause it's
5
gonna
million
take
hectares of forest,
225
an area
turns.
larger than the
Jesus.
entire country of Costa Rica. In November 2019, the Gospers Mountain Fire ignited northwest of Sydney. Within weeks, it had grown into a monster, consuming everything in its path as it swept through the Blue Mountains region. Fire maps showed the blaze heading directly toward the classified location, where fewer than 100 Wollemi pines clung to survival in their secret canyon. As the fire approached, park managers faced an agonizing decision. The Wollemi pine grove had survived in secret for 25 years precisely because humans stayed away.
Am I not getting...
Now,
Am I ski-
saving
do I
it
not
would
get
require
ski
the most
resorts or
intensive
something?
human intervention in the species' modern history. In late December 2019, as smoke columns towered
Are
above
ski
the Blue
resorts
Mountains,
broken?
a covert operation began. Specialist remote area firefighters were helicoptered into the canyon under extreme secrecy. Their mission? Install an irrigation system that could keep the grove saturated even as fire swept overhead. Working around the clock, the team set up pumps and sprinklers fed by the canyon's water sources. They drenched not just the trees themselves, but the entire surrounding area, creating a buffer of wet vegetation and saturated soil. Meanwhile, aerial tankers conducted precision water bombing runs, dropping thousands of liters directly onto the grove and its approaches. When the smoke finally cleared in January 2020, aerial photographs revealed a remarkable sight: a ribbon of green Wollemi pines standing tall amid a landscape of charred rock and blackened earth. The ancient trees had survived, protected by the most expensive and technologically sophisticated firefighting operation ever mounted for a plant species. But the victory came with a sobering realization. Climate change was fundamentally altering the equation for Wollemi pine survival. The 2019 fires weren't a once-in-a-century anomaly. They were a preview of Australia's new normal. This reality drove the next phase of conservation strategy, establishing backup populations in multiple secret locations across the region. Teams began planting hundreds of young Wallamai pines in carefully selected sites, creating a network of insurance populations that could survive even if the original grove was lost. The species that had once depended on isolation for survival now depended entirely on human intervention.
You know what's funny? I got to
Today,
147.
the wild Wallamai pine
how.
population stands at exactly where the crisis began. 45 mature trees and 46 juveniles clinging to existence in their secret canyon. The Phytophthora infection that alarmed scientists in 2005 remains present in the grove. Infected trees receive regular phosphite treatments, chemical injections that boost their natural defenses and slow the disease's progression. Meanwhile, the translocation program has quietly expanded into one of the most ambitious rewilding projects in Australian history. At least 3 secret locations now host backup populations of young Wallamai pines, each site chosen for its geological similarity to the original canyon, but far enough away that a single catastrophe can't destroy.
I was like, join ongoing war, what will you offer me? 1 gold? That'll do.
Yeah, that's like me with Stalin that one game. You know what, Stalin? You got a deal. I can't believe Stalin basically betrayed me in the end, and I had to take care of him.
Well, I instantly took his...
He was such a good friend in the beginning to me.
I instantly took his builder.
Good, fuck him. Just need to fucking... There's these barbarians down here.
Mm.
They're gonna fucking block my settlers and shit. That's why I can't attack Rome right now. I need to secure my forward operating base.
Fair enough.
For the invasion of Rome.
I positioned my unit so I could go and sack his uranium immediately. Just to hinder him if he's converted to nuclear power.
Everything.
I want to know what
insurance
Norway
populations
is doing
face their own
more.
challenges.
Yeah.
The 2019 fires that threatened the original grove actually destroyed most of the
Moral
first
support.
translocation site, incinerating hundreds of carefully planted saplings. But rather than abandoning the strategy, managers doubled down. By 2021, they had replanted those sites and established new ones, spreading the genetic legacy of the Wallamai pine across an ever wider network of hidden refuges. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation is cultural. The Wallamai pine has evolved from a botanical curiosity into a diplomatic symbol for Australia. Prime ministers regularly present saplings to foreign leaders as gifts,
Hilarious.
living embodiments of the
Here,
country's
bitch, have a
ancient
tree.
natural heritage and modern conservation expertise. Yet challenges remain formidable. Climate models predict increasingly severe droughts and heat waves across southeastern Australia. The microclimate that has protected the Wallamai pines for millions of years may become uninhabitable within decades. But this story also proves that creative conservation can work miracles. Through classified locations, market flooding, and global cooperation, we've given a species that was down to its last few individuals a fighting chance at survival. The dinosaur tree that almost vanished in secret now grows in gardens worldwide. A living reminder that extinction isn't inevitable if we refuse to accept it. If you want to discover more incredible rediscovery stories, check out our next video about the black-naped pheasant pigeon, a bird that was seen for the first time in 140 years in the remote forests of Papua New Guinea.
That's right, I know
Subscribe
about this.
so you don't miss these amazing...
That was an interesting video. What a weird tree. Hey look, here's another video about tree.
Just like every one of you, I have at times wondered, does sound help plants grow? Now, we've all heard that talking to your plants helps them grow, but when you're talking to your plants, you're essentially shooting carbon dioxide at them. I theorize that talking creepily and closely and erotically to your plants will help them grow even more, which is scientific evidence that all plants want to f*** humans. This is plastic, by the way. What about just plain old carbon dioxide-less sound? Let's find out.
Yes.
No.
Evidence. Pseudoscience.
Well, we got ourselves an excuse to conduct a good old scientific experiment. And I have seriously, painstakingly conducted an experiment over the last 2 months that quite convincingly suggests that specific sounds can increase plant growth and biomass. And it technically would not be clickbait if the title and thumbnail of this video was, "I have discovered sonic fertilizer." But hold on, there are a lot of asterisks that I need to hand out. What type of plant, what type of soil, what type of speaker, what type of setting, and that is more or less the point of this video. Now, I am, of course, going to show you a bunch of cool plant stuff, and in my opinion, it is really awesome. But while I'm showing it to you, I'm also going to be talking to you about what science is, and we're going to be addressing the big, gigantic elephant in the science room, the repeatability crisis, the fact that only 1/3 of modern scientific studies have results that can be repeated again, and what that means for everything. Back in 1962, a study at Animal University found that the growth rate of holy basil plants increased by 20% when consistently exposed to classical music, resulting in an increased 72% of biomass. They switched it up to some Indian ragas, and that yielded similar results. They tried even more experiments with string instruments and harmoniums and rena music, and eventually reached the conclusion that the violin was the most effective instrument for plant growth. Not long after that, in Canada, another researcher managed to replicate this with wheat fields by playing Bach's Violin Sonata. And then things got a little, kooky. In the early 1970s, a musician and author by the name of Dorothy Retallick decided to run some experiments of her own. I won't go into all of the details, but she arranged some inadequately defined plant chambers, put a speaker inside of them, and played different types of music for the plants, and the results were astonishing. It turns out that the plants really liked listening to classical music and Indian ragas, and not only grew faster, but grew towards the speaker playing the music. However, the plants hated and grew away from the speaker when abrasive music such as Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix was played.
Amazing.
In fact, some of them died when being exposed to that stuff, and the plants didn't seem to like discordant classical music or single tones either. Wow. Dorothy wrote a now somewhat infamous book called The Sound of Music and Plants that showed off her findings and was widely published in 1973. My interpretation of the book was not that Dorothy was interested in increasing plant yield as much as she was interested in attempting to prove that there was a positive music and a negative music. But not only were her results not reproducible, but her methodology and even theory was pretty unclear. She was also religious and tried to staple her results to higher conclusions about New Age beliefs such as ESP and astrology. But what I personally found more problematic was the anthropomorphization, which I think is the longest word I've ever said on this channel. But to anthropomorphize something is to project human attributes to non-human things. Lucy loves being on camera. Hers knows that all the people watching think she's so cute. Plants don't have feelings or emotions, much less do they enjoy or dislike particular genres of music. Naturally, that didn't stop the book from being treated as solid evidence by newspapers and writers across the world, and you can still see citations to her experiment on the internet today. But it did piss off a lot of scientists, and it became a bit of a de facto example of what one should be observant for if they intend to research effectively. So why does scientific method exist? A common answer is to find out how the world around us works, or create a workflow to find truth. But a much, much more accurate answer is that scientific method was created to reduce human bias. If you put your life savings into developing a speaker device that you believe will one day help plants grow, you'll naturally be more receptive to information supporting the idea that sound helps plants grow. Or maybe you had a hippie ex-girlfriend that used to wake up at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning and play stupid sounding music really loud for her plants. If that's the case, then chances are that you'll probably be more receptive to information showing that sound has no effect on plants. And what we need to do is wedge right between those two biases in a way that is only fueled by our raw curiosity. And with that mindset, there are no disappointing outcomes. The results of proper scientific method can only reward you, and any criticism of your theories or experiments can only enlighten you. All right, so before we do anything with sound, we need to create a control group.
Oh,
We're
really?
growing wheatgrass and chia in a completely isolated hydroponic chamber with 22 hours of bright light at 6,000 Kelvin, keeping us at a consistent,
Eureka for rocketry, I need
degrees
that.
Fahrenheit. The water will be constantly pumped and circulated in each hydroponic chamber to prevent any buildup of minerals or fungus in any specific areas, and there will be no fertilizer in the water. We're basically converting electricity into grass for 12 days per trial. One thing that I like to do is dig a deep, pedantic rabbit hole in my head that keeps asking more and more questions. For example, where's the water coming from, Ben? Fine. I'll filter and boil the water. Where will you be storing the water, Ben? Fine, I'll put it in airtight metal containers. Did you make sure the seeds were all the same size, Ben? Fine, I'll weigh them. Did you make sure the super sensitive scale is calibrated? Fine, I guess I'll test it by weighing density verified pieces of metal. This gets very time consuming and expensive, but not nearly as time consuming and as expensive as running the entire experiment over again to rule this type of thing out. And then in this control group, we're going to be testing 4 different configurations for 2 different plants. Dry seeds, seeds pre-soaked for 24 hours, then dry seed and pre-soaked seeds under a little greenhouse container. So 8 total configurations, and the winner gets to be the configuration that gets to graduate to the sound experiment. Semantics and painfully annoying details are everything. A good example. Is there sound in outer space? The answer to this question is almost always a resounding no, because space is a vacuum and pressure waves cannot exist in a vacuum, right? No, actually, it doesn't really work like that. The Earth's gravity is what keeps our atmosphere glued to the planet, and it gradually diminishes the farther you get from the center of the Earth. So halfway between the Earth and the moon, you still will have a little bit of Earth's atmosphere. I did a whole fucking video on this that nobody watched. Okay, so to figure out if there's sound in space, we need to define what space means. Where does the Earth end and space begin? Fortunately, Theodore von Karman calculated the theoretical limit for airplane flight at 52.1 miles above Earth, and the FAI and almost everybody else called that the Karman line, aka the border where outer space begins. Then NOAA was like, actually the Karman line is 62 miles above sea level, and then the FAI was like, you know what, we changed our mind, it's 100 kilometers, and then the US Air Force said, nope, it's 50 miles above sea level, and then NASA was like, nah guys, it's 72 miles, and then Theodore von Karman himself said, you know what, I was wrong, it's actually really stupid to make a binary line between Earth and space. These days the Karman line is debated and redefined every time another billionaire builds a giant cock and shoots himself into the sky. But the reason I cannot tell you if you could hear sound in space or not is because it's a deeply flawed question. More on that in a second. Okay, the chia seeds just kind of sucked in general. The greenhouse lids didn't seem to do much other than physically hold the wheatgrass back, and the dry seeds performed about 30% better than the pre-soaked seeds, so that's our baseline. Now we'll put in new filtered and boiled water, new perfectly weighed seeds, new sponges, and redo the entire experiment. But this time with a 4,000 hertz zero-degree phase sine wave coming from 2 of these III monitors, which are actually pretty loud and accurate. The sine wave itself will be generated by a tone generator and will be playing for 24 hours a day for 12 days. One row of plants will be directly in the 72 decibel field of audio, and the other row will be outside of the direct field, punching in around 64 decibels, each with their own circulated water. And the reason I chose 4,000 hertz is, after doing a lot of study reading, it seems like plants from the camelidid clade tend to benefit from pressure waves around that frequency. Okay, see you in 12 days. Technically, it is not cold outside right now. It's just that there's not enough thermal energy being transferred from one system to another
Level
system.
3 climate change.
Or even more accurately, the atoms around here are just not moving fast enough. This would be an incredibly annoying way to communicate, but the overall purpose of this video is to tell you and hopefully demonstrate to you a little bit, at least, that there is no such thing
Nobody's
as
using
a
enough
definite
oil
truth or
to
a definite
for
answer
impact,
or a binary.
I should
Every
say.
single thing in science, and as far as we know in reality, exists on a spectrum somewhere between highly improbable and highly probable. So that's obviously why so many research papers tend to use math instead of a simplified conversational language when getting into the specifics of a theory or an experiment. If A is greater than B, then A plus 3 will be greater than B plus 3. And for your theory to be true, then every single formula that you throw at the original will verify the theory. And that's what makes it true. But in 1931, a hipster by the name of Kurt Gödel published his now infamous incompleteness theorems, which are not easy to read or digest. I own a few books that are published for the sole purpose of helping one digest Gödel's papers, and you need to read books on formal logic theory to help you digest those. But in a very tiny, compressed nutshell, what Gödel's incompleteness theorem tells us is that the only true thing about mathematics is that there is no such thing as true. Every theory that is built on even the most basic mathematical formula or arithmetic is incomplete. And as far as we know, it always will be. Does this mean that mathematics is broken or unreliable? No. It just means that every single thing that we observe or theorize exists on a spectrum between probable and improbable. Okay, so the row of grass that was in the indirect field of sound grew a little bit better with the 4,000 hertz tone than without. The direct row of wheatgrass, as in the ones directly in a loud-ass sound field, grew over 2 inches more and had a 28% increase in biomass. This was honestly surprising to me. I did not expect anything that significant out of this. Okay, but what does this mean?
Touch the Matterhorn on your way to war.
I can think of 3 theories. Number 1, something about this particular frequency signals the wheatgrass that conditions are favorable for survival with increased biomass.
I literally have 4 units around.
I'm still waiting for a fucking trade route to come up.
It could be possible that the
take?
acoustic pressure increases the efficiency of photosynthesis by
is.
stimulating cellular activity in the plant itself. Number 3, that frequency of pressure waves could be assisting the plant in carrying its own weight. Which
I'll have a commercial hub, and my
trader
who's
that
in
sounds
my
silly,
base
but
here
we're talking to somebody who shares a patent
will probably be able
acoustic
to
levitation.
move by the
So
time.
I admit that's improbable, but I would really like to rule that out. Okay, this is going to take a bit longer than expected. Let's move the chamber to a safer place with some backup power and then try to tackle number 3 first. We need to find a probable average resonant frequency of the blades of wheatgrass and the ideal phase between the 2 monitors. Then new water, new sponges, new seeds, do the whole thing over for another 12 days. I've made a much more serious video that talks about this quite a bit, but there's a major war on truth and objectivity happening right now, and one of the weapons that's used in this war is intentionally misrepresenting the replication or reproducibility crisis as a way to discredit the effectiveness of research and scientific method. That way, truth becomes more malleable, and pesky things like being completely fucking wrong don't get in the way of your personal objective. You've probably seen the headlines. The majority of modern research studies and experiments happening in fields like chemistry, biology, medicine, and earth sciences have not or cannot be reproduced. And of course, you've heard about fields like environmental safety and climate change and the sociological effects of poverty being really shaky, unreliable fields of science. And when you hear this stuff without understanding the purpose of scientific method, it sounds like science, or our compass for finding truth, is fractured and inaccurate. But that's horseshit. If you can't tell, I am pretty psychotically serious about my coffee. Now let's say that I conducted a study where I put this particular bean and roast and brew on 1,000 people's wounds or abrasions or burns, and it halved the recovery time, or I guess made the healing time twice as fast. And let's say that it reduced infection over the baseline by 80%. And then somebody in Japan attempts to replicate my study and gets either slightly or drastically different results. That doesn't make my study any less true or useful. Scientific theories are not opinions. They are designed to be falsifiable. That lack of reproducibility actually adds a new layer onto my research and could help figure out what exactly is going on. And that precision could be useful in improving the healing or disinfection rates, or I guess just reducing the amount of people that would have to have my coffee rubbed in their wounds. The replication crisis is more about researchers not being funded to reproduce their own or others' studies. And some of that is probably because of capitalism. A fracking company is not going to be interested in spending money on a do-over for a published study of the safety of a new chemical if the first study yielded favorable results for them.